I met up with Rachel and the Hill sisters. After a couple of minutes Aiden left. They had smelt him on me and knew that I had sexual intercourse, which then of course, completed the bond. Rachel became an overprotective mother, like dragging me to the PAC hospital and asking for a birth control pill. I guess I could thank her for that. It was around midday that we were all now heading towards the PAC house for some lunch. Imagine Elena's reaction when she's been informed that you and your mate have completed the bond. Stachi exclaimed, excitedly. Stacy was wearing denim short shorts, a black blouse that only reached just above her belly button with black combat boots. Her nose doesn't even look normal anymore. We all laughed. I need to meet that bitch, Rachel growled playfully, which made Julia step back a bit as I sniffed the fear emanating from her. She wouldn't hurt you, Jules. I laughed and linked my arm in both Julia's and Rachel's. Before we could take another step forward, Elena and her group of friends appeared before us with a smirk. Elena wore her usual dark makeup with leather black shorts and a blank tank top. Her blonde hair was tightly curled. Before I closely observed her face, and I hated to admit it, but she was right, her nose was crooked. Elena and I were about to say something when Rachel and Stacy busted out laughing hysterically as Elena arched an eyebrow at me, her group of friends following. Are these your chimpanzees friends? My jaw dropped at her insult and was about to say something Elena would say until Rachel beat me to it. So this is the Elena girl who has been flirting with Alpha Aiden yet gets no attention from him whatsoever. I bit my lip to hold myself back from laughing as Julia stifled a giggle beside me whilst Stachi and Rachel were being cocky as fuck. I could tell by Elena's face that she was getting angry since her makeup couldn't cover up the fact that she was tomato red. Who the fuck are you? Elena questioned viciously, trying to stay calm as her eyes turned dark multiple times whilst they glared at my cousin. I'm Rachel, cousin of Davina and Beta's mate of one of the Australian's strongest packs, Rachel answered proudly as I smiled at how confident she was. What? Does kangaroos live with you too? Elena questioned as she busted out laughing along with her friends who were trembling with fear as what their Luna might do to them afterwards. Rachel's facial expression turned into a poker face, the power of a beta radiating off of her. Talk about my pack like that and I'll make sure you won't be able to realize what you look like anymore. I smelt a bit of fear from Elena as she visibly took a step back with a gulp yet still maintained her brave face. I'm the pack's best fighter, so I wouldn't if I were you. Is that why your nose looks like that? Stachi questioned enthusiastically. You're one of the best, not the. I would laugh at this if I wasn't Luna, but as a Luna, I was to make sure everyone in this pack felt safe and loved. I took a step forward and shot my girls one of my best death glares before putting on a forced smile at Elena. You don't need to feel threatened, Elena. I'm here for you as a Luna, but I really don't appreciate the way you talk to my friends and my family member like that. Elena's eyes widened at my words before stomping off, her friends staring at me in awe. Girls. And that was all it took for Elena's minions to stumble forward with a bow before hurrying towards their leader. How can you be so kind? Rachel questioned, pulling a face. I don't understand you sometimes. Me neither, Stacy added before the both of them linked arms and skipped towards the pack house. I shook my head in amusement and smiled before linking my arm with Julius as we both skipped towards the pack house. Once we all stepped foot inside the pack house, we all sighed in content at the delicious smell of lasagne that I think was freshly made and cooked. A sudden wave of sadness washed over me, knowing that I was feeling Aiden's emotions right now. Miss me already? I asked through the mind link, biting my lip. It's so good to hear your voice again, he answered with pure excitement in his tone. I miss you so much that it's basically killing my inner wolf and I laughed. Be home soon, please. I promise. And with that, he disconnected the mind link after someone in the background was yelling at him to pay attention. It was probably Ace. I shook my head in amusement as Julia, Stacy and Rachel stared at me as if I was a madwoman. We called you a billion times yet no answer, so then we figured you were mind linking your babe, Rachel commented, making me giggle like a little girl before stealing her fork and eating the leftover lasagna that was put out in front of her. Okay, that was low. Do not ever touch my food ever again. I laughed and nodded before noticing Jake in the corner of my eye, leaning against the wall and staring at me with an unreadable expression. I turned my head towards Rachel and nudged her softly. "There's this man, and his name is Jake," I whispered to her. The second the name Jake escaped my lips, she dropped her fork and turned her full attention on me, ignoring her food as I continued. "He has been staring at me every time I would walk inside the pack house, and we've only talked once. It's beginning to creep me out." "Where?" Rachel questioned, giving me a look. I raised my eyebrow at her in confusion, and used my head, pointing towards the wall as she nodded and drew her lips in a tight line before abandoning the plate of lasagna. "We gotta go train," Julia said sadly, giving me a brief hug. "It's part of our everyday routine now." I laughed at her lack of enthusiasm whilst Stachi pumped her fists into the air in triumph and shouted, "I love training." And with that, Stachi kissed me on both sides of my cheeks before skipping outside as Julia trailed behind, groaning in annoyance. In the corner of my eyes, I see a young girl no older than 9 in the corner of the pack living room as she twisted her red hair around her index finger. I wiped my mouth with a napkin before approaching her slowly. "Hello," I said softly, letting myself sit next to the tiny figure. She looked up at me with her hazel eyes and grinned sadly before her eyes widened in realization. "Are you Luna Divina?" I laughed quietly and nodded. "And you must be Patricia," she answered. "What are you doing here?" I questioned in a soft voice. "Do you have any friends?" Patricia nodded as a tear slid down her cheek. "They call me Pat, but I really hate that nickname. They even call me Redhead, which I think is kind of rude." A smile was playing on my lips before taking her small hand into mine, Luna instinct kicking in. "If they call you Redhead, accept it. Think of yourself as Ariel the Little Mermaid. You like that Disney princess, right?" She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Ariel is a redhead and I think she's absolutely beautiful, just like you, Patricia. And if they ever call you any mean names that you hate, tell them that they have to speak to the Luna and then the Luna will have a very mean talk to them." Patricia's smile widened as she nodded before jumping up, embracing me briefly. "I will them right away. Thank you so much, Luna." And with that, she pecked me on the cheek before scattering off towards her friends who had been playing hide and seek. An overwhelming feeling washed throughout my body, the power of a Luna. "You're such a great Luna," Aiden's voice rung inside my head as my mouth dropped open. "The kids love you, so tone it down on the mean talk. Concentrate on the elders," I snapped, hearing Aiden's chuckles before I disconnected our mind link. I stood up, brushing off any dust off my dress, and went to find Rachel, who I last seen was heading to. I slid the doors open and found Rachel frowning whilst talking to Jake, who had his head in his hands. "You need to tell her," Rachel trailed off once her eyes snapped towards mine. Jake's eyes snapped in my direction as well as I gave them an awkward, little wave. "Sorry if I interrupted a very important conversation," I apologized with a soft smile as Rachel's eyes softened and shook her head immediately whilst Jake still had on that unreadable expression. Just before Rachel could say something, a loud piercing scream shot through the pack house as my eyes immediately widened before I hurried inside as many children and adults began to shuffle up the stairs quickly. My heartbeat increased as I bolted out to the front porch where I saw the leader of the pack fighters who were shouting orders towards a group of multicolored wolves. "Go." His voice boomed, which made the wolves bolt towards the woods. "George, what happened?" I asked, confused as George looked at me with his piercing blue eyes and ran a hand through his messy blonde hair. "Luna Divina, a pack of rogues has crossed the territory lines. I've sent 2 groups after them as well as some trackers. Some pack guards who were guarding the borderline has already chased after them and a few are staying here to protect the pack members," he explained quickly, running out of breath. "Luna Divina, you should go inside and stay safe. I've already contacted Alpha Aiden and he's on his way." With that said, he shifted into his blonde wolf before hurrying towards the woods. My heartbeat was still pumping viciously as I spotted Rachel and Jake running towards me with worry. "We need to help," Jake and Rachel nodded instantly. We shifted into our wolves, Rachel in her auburn wolf and Jake in his dark brown one. Our paws thundered against the earth as we tried sniffing our way to the battlegrounds. I spotted my pack fighters fighting for their lives from unfamiliar rogues. I growled and took a big leap at a tan wolf who was already distracted, and without wasting any time, I sank my canines into its body easily before throwing its limp body away. Luna Divina, a rogue has managed to enter the pack grounds and it's too strong for me to handle alone. I need your assistance, please. Elena's voice rung inside my head as my wolf instantly bolted towards the pack grounds faster than ever. Nothing should ever happen to my pack members, nothing. I reached the pack grounds within a few minutes. Seeing Elena's light, yellow wolf gets tackled onto the ground by a dark, gray one. I growled out loud as I could feel the blood in my veins boil, a very foreign feeling. The dark gray wolf eyed me suspiciously for a moment, and the next thing I knew, the day gray wolf lunged towards me, managing to bite my tail as I howled in pain. Elena nodded towards me before leaping on the wolf, trying to sink her canines into its neck whilst I used the advantage to use my hinds and kick the wolf off of Elena. I lunged towards the wolf and used my front two paws to keep it in place and was about to sink my canines into him until I got kicked in the face by another rogue, the pain quickly shooting into my head. Divina, go somewhere safe. Aiden's voice roared inside my head as I shook my head and squinted my eyes at the large, dark brown wolf, ignoring the cold showers that traveled down my spine. Elena managed to distract the gray wolf as I used the advantage to use my alpha speed and sink my canines into its body hard, making the gray wolf howl in pain for a second before throwing his limp body to the side. I knew it wasn't just the alpha speed who did all the work. My canines had to do something with it along with my blood because it boiled fiercely. It does not take just one bite for a wolf to die. Elena and I focused on our target, which happened to be the large, dark brown wolf, as it shook its head in amusement and lunged towards me. Elena and I growled simultaneously before it lunged towards us. I managed to dodge the attack, but Elena were bitten when she tried to sink her canines into its body. My wolf growled in anger and leaped towards the wolf, whose eyes glinted in amusement. I observed the wolf as it quickly turned back and bolted back into the woods. I followed behind, determined not to let it go. My blood boiled in anger as I chased after it, but only to be stopped when I felt pain soaring through my own body, weakening my wolf as I snapped my head to the dark brown wolf disappearing into the distance, my ears picking up a howl of victory. I snapped my head to the other side right after picking up another set of paws, but before my eyes could fully adjust, a blurry wolf knocked me out a few seconds later. I woke up due to the coldness that swallowed me. I blinked twice to get rid of the blurriness before my eyes danced around, sighing in relief that I was only in one of the pack hospital's private rooms. I glanced towards my side where Rachel's hand was on top of mine. Her head was on top of our entwined hands. I smiled and moved my fingers a bit as she suddenly sat upright. Her eyes widened in shock, then filled with relief. Divina, it's been 2 fucking days, thank Moon Goddess. My eyes widened in shock at her words. I tried connecting myself to my wolf, but only to feel nothing, guessing she only disconnected herself from me. The curtains of my room were drawn together, blocking out any sunlight from entering. My body ached, especially my waist, as I suddenly winced whilst trying to lift myself up so I was able to lean against the headboard. The door opened a bit, enough for the doctor's, whose name I learnt was John, head to peek in. A smile formed on his tired face as he stepped in and closed the door behind him, holding a clipboard against his chest. He ruffled his black hair as usual and rubbed his brown eyes as if he'd just woken up. Thanks to Rachel, I was able to be notified that you have woken up, his deep voice said softly as he approached me. I've been seeing more of you recently. I laughed lightly whilst he shook his head teasingly as Rachel rolled her eyes and clutched my hand tightly as if I was going to disappear any moment now. What are the damages? Rachel asked, a bit too desperately. Nothing major. When Alpha Aiden found you being dragged by a group of rogues, you had a wolf bite on your waist, and so maybe that's why you're in pain. You must have gotten a bite on your tail as well, and that's why your leg hurts. Your forehead has been bruised, but it's gone thanks to your wolf healing, he answered calmly. Are you connected to your wolf at the moment? I shook my head whilst rubbing my temples, feeling a headache coming on. She's disconnected herself from me, he frowned. That should be normal because she's tired and needs a break. But after a week or so, if she still hasn't connected herself to you yet, please come and see me. I nodded with a smile. Thank you, it's my job, he replied before bowing his head to me in submission, giving Rachel a stern look before leaving the both of us to talk. I exhaled heavily, the ache in my chest was coming along as I craved for my mate. Where's Aiden? God, you don't even want to know, Davina, she answered, running her fingers through her red hair quickly. The moment you were brought here and being checked up, he has given everyone the cold shoulder. He had a meeting with a group of men about your protection and the security of the pack. Also for the past 2 days, I'm assuming he hasn't slept a wink because the dark, ugly under-eye circles are clearly visible since he's been running around his territory to make sure no rogue has remained or trespassed. My chest ached for him and my heart sunk to my stomach as Rachel continued on. You also don't even want to know how many pack guards has been placed on the borderline as well. I shrugged and get off the bed slowly as Rachel rushed to the other side to help me stand up steadily. I looked down at my outfit where I had been wearing my own gray sweatpants and one of Aiden's white t-shirt. I inhaled his delicious scent to comfort me. Do you want to see him? Rachel asked, sadness laced in her voice. I bit my lip and nodded. Rachel helped me leave the pack hospital as many nurses bowed their heads in respect. Once we made it outside, the fresh, warm breeze slammed into me as I welcomed it. Rachel and I came into view as we stepped onto the pack grounds where adults and children jumped up in the air in pure joy to see their Luna feeling well and alive. I looked to my left and right to see 4 medium-sized groups of trainers pumping their fists in triumph at the sight of their Luna as I only managed to return little waves. They've been really worried about you, Rachel whispered as the pack members went back to minding their own business. They've also been worried about their alpha, I nodded, speechless that my pack members actually cared so much. I smiled to myself as my eyes landed on Julia and Stacy, running towards me before tackling me gently as they prepped me with kisses on my face. I laughed as they pulled back and sighed in relief. Girl, you're one hell of a strong woman. Stacy punched my arm lightly, causing me to wince in pain as guilt flashed across her face. I waved my hand to signal that I was okay. Everyone's been praying, Julia exclaimed, tears brimming her eyes in joy. I cannot tell you how thankful I am, I replied with a smile, my voice becoming hoarse. Oh, I brought you water. Stachi exclaimed, handing me a water bottle which I took gratefully before chugging down the water greedily as a familiar, delicious scent crawled up my nostrils. Across the pack grounds, I caught a glimpse of a cold and dangerous man, his vibes emanating from him as he walked out of the woods shirtless and only in his gray sweats. A group of pack trackers followed behind nervously as my smile widened once I saw his broad figure. I immediately let go of Rachel and ran towards Aiden, whose eyes widened once they caught sight of me. I could feel the pain soaring through every inch of my body, but I ignored it along with everyone's confused stares, and finally jumping into his arms which he had held out happily. My head nestled into the crook of his head, inhaling his scent as he did the same. I could feel the tines shoot through my body as he placed me on the ground gently while prepping my face with kisses. Rachel was right, his under-eye circles were clearly visible, which made him look even more scarier apart from the cold, dangerous vibes. His hair was also a total mess. I cautiously placed my palm on his left cheek as he closed his eyes immediately and leaned against my touch in comfort. You have no idea, Aiden trailed off in a husky voice which only made me blush in embarrassment. Okay, back to minding your own business now. Stachi yelled at the small crowd who had gathered around, who I only noticed after her words. Some groaned and some squealed in happiness. Stacy shot me a wink before slinging her arm around Julius and Rachel's shoulders, tugging them towards the pack house as they pouted. I threw my head back and laughed at how fearless Stachi could be. I felt Aiden's eyes burn on the side of my face as I gave him a side glance and smile. I missed you, he whispered, lacing my fingers with his. And I missed you, I whispered back as I led him to our home where he could get some sleep. Once I stepped foot inside, the house was just the way it was, and I was surprised to see everything still standing and in one piece. Aiden ran his free fingers through his brunette hair and tugged me towards our bedroom. With every step I took, my legs would ache, and I could tell that he could also feel it through the bond because he kept wincing. "I'm sorry," I whispered, sadly. I hated having myself to see him like this. His brown determined eyes met mine before shaking his head furiously. "Please don't say you're sorry. This isn't your fault." I bit my lip and nodded, watching Aiden's eyes grow dark before returning back to brown. He laid me gently on the bed as he jumped beside me, our legs now intertwined and our bodies pressed close against each other. "Sleep," I murmured as I could feel his breathing and his heartbeat against my ear steady. His arms tightened around my waist, holding me tightly as if someone or something was going to rip me away from him. I didn't know how long I had been sleeping for, but I knew I wanted to stay in my mate's arms. His breathing and touch was warm as ever as I looked at my nightstand and read the time, 4:30 a.m. My stomach grumped as I untangled myself from him slowly and quietly, descending the stairs in darkness as I turned on the kitchen lights. I winced when the bright lights filled my room before making my way past the kitchen counter and towards the fridge. I took out a tub of vanilla ice cream and placed it on the counter. I was about to grab a spoon until my eyes landed on a bouquet of roses. I grinned at how sweet Aiden was as I quickly picked it up and inhaled its scent. My grin disappeared once I gagged at the horrifying smell coming from the roses, throwing it back onto the counter as the hint of scent was still somewhere in my nostrils. It smelt of rotten bodies and, well, blood. I tilted my head in confusion and found a card next to the bouquet, my eyes scanning the cursive writing. "My Rosalies, you're not safe even if you have Alpha Aiden protecting you. Oh, and why not look inside the roses? Love, me X." My mouth dropped open as my heartbeat suddenly picked up when I picked up the bouquet of roses, slowly this time. Sweat was starting to form on my forehead as I used one of my free shaking hands to part the roses. A scream was stuck in my throat, unable to escape from my lips as my eyes widened at the lifeless hand that has been chopped off. Rose was written in big and red on the back of its pale hand. I threw the bouquet of roses onto the floor, and was able to scream. My body shook in fear as my blood boiled, quickly backing away from the roses and the lifeless hand that was now in sight whilst I leaned against the fridge. I pulled my shaking knees to my heaving chest and hugged my head with my arms, afraid of what might happen next. I heard thunderous footsteps over the loud beating of my heart proceed down the stairs, but didn't dare look up because it could be anyone. "Be brave, Davina." I didn't feel brave at all. Strong hands gripped my arms tightly, sending tingles through me, but I flinched at the sudden movement which caused the arms to quickly pull me into its embrace. I didn't cry, and I didn't plan on it. "What happened?" Aiden whispered in a sleepy voice yet also in a cold tone. "They'll tell you when you wake up from sleep," I answered, my voice trembling as he nodded before picking me up in a bridal style. I didn't want to worry him, just yet. I allowed him to carry me towards our bedroom and watched him lay beside me once he gently placed me down. I watched his arms snake around my waist as I eased myself to relax into his arms. I listened to him breathe steadily again, and knew that sleep had already crashed into his body, but I was still wide awake. I watched the children from my bedroom window pile into 3 Range Rovers that was parked on the pack grounds, getting ready to head to school. I was homeschooled after I turned 16 because my father informed me that my head wasn't in the game, and besides, I didn't have many human friends that I could count on. I sighed, descending the staircase, expecting a horrifying scent to crawl up my nostrils, yet none of them came at all. Last night memories replaying inside my head. My eyes danced around the kitchen, Aiden talking to Rachel as I noticed that they were frowning at each other as if they were deep into a conversation. I gulped and looked down at the tiles where I threw the bouquet of roses, a lifeless hand hidden inside, but the floor was completely empty. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked quietly, standing up slowly as she approached me. "Where's the roses with the—" I trailed off, pointing to the floor where the roses has been last night before looking up at Aiden to see him approaching me swiftly with a blank facade, pulling me into an embrace. He stroked my hair with his fingers as I could sense Rachel leaving us to our moment. I placed my chin on his hard chest, his glowing brown eyes staring into my blue ones with happiness and desire. "Do you want to go on a date with me?" Aiden questioned out of the blue. You deserve a break after going through hell. My mouth gaped open but suddenly formed into a wide smile. My heart skipped a beat at his words as butterflies attacked my stomach. When? I asked excitedly as I pulled myself away from his hold and was now jumping on the sofa, hearing his groans. Now, he answered with a sexy smirk. I got the day off today, so hurry and get your lazy ass changed. I threw my head back and laughed, racing him towards our bedroom, and unfortunately, he won. He swooped me into his arms as I rolled my eyes and playfully punched his hard chest a couple of times before giving up, knowing that he wouldn't budge at all. Whoever dresses the fastest, wins, he declared, quickly placing me on the floor gently before bolting for our closet. My jaw dropped, leaping towards my part of the closet, and quickly slipped on a pair of high-waisted, faded, ripped denim jeans and a white singlet. I looked back to see Aiden, who was still looking through his clothes, my inner wolf howling in joy that we would win after all before I grabbed a gray cardigan that reached just past my ass. I rushed towards my vanity and brushed through my long, brunette hair down and applied a light coat of makeup. I jumped out of my seat and grabbed a beige purse before running out of the walk-in closet, shouting, "Done." My eyes widened at Aiden, who was fake yawning whilst resting against the headboard of the bed. I swore only a minute ago, he was still looking through his closet. He threw on a pair of maroon, skinny jeans and a white t-shirt that clung onto his body, outlining his abs as his hair was some sort of a natural yet messy look. I caught his eyes roaming around my body as I watched them turn dark before they moved upwards, his meeting mine. I smirked, motioning towards my body. Are you craving this? Without hesitation, he nodded. I laughed as I had to drag him off the bed so we could get an early start. He slumped an arm around me, kissing my temples before leading me to the back of our home where his Ferrari was parked outside the garage. I sighed in content as he led me to the passenger seat, opened the door for me before I questioned, "Well, aren't you a gentleman?" He cocked an eyebrow. "Get your sexy ass inside." I feigned hurt as I placed a hand over my heart and quickly got in. He rounded the car and jumped into the driver's seat before quickly pressing a button as the engine roared. I smirked and placed both of my legs in between his as his left leg was propped up so there would be space. I allowed my back to be against the door, letting the side of my head to rest against the seat. "Are you serious?" he questioned playfully, trying to maintain a serious facial expression yet failed miserably. "Mr. Alpha, if you don't get this car moving then we will come home very late," I answered, shaking my head in disappointment before looking at the time that read, 5:30 p.m. He only shrugged before putting his left hand on the wheel whilst his right hand rested on my knee. I observed his eyes as they focused on the road ahead, watching how his jawline was structured and how he was so perfect. "If you're going to keep staring at me then I won't be able to concentrate," he pointed out as I rolled my eyes with a smile before fluttering them close. I didn't know how long we had been driving for, but I immediately woke up when a warm hand rested on my skin. My eyes fluttered open drowsily as Aiden gave me a warm smile whilst I took my legs off of his and pulled them to my chest. Aiden got out of the car and rounded it, opening the passenger door as he offered a hand. I chuckled and took it without hesitation, feeling warmth seep through my skin, and once I exited the car, the cold breeze surrounded the both of us. "Where are we?" I asked, confused. "A restaurant, only half an hour far, but it's definitely worth it," he answered with a genuine smile, my heart skipping a beat. He led me inside a fancy restaurant where some people were in business outfits whilst others were in fancier ones. I looked up to see a waitress. Her name tag said Brianna, as she batted her eyelashes at my mate who didn't seem interested at all. I almost chuckled at her efforts as she led us to our table, adding a hip sway to it. I rolled my eyes as she motioned towards a two-seated table in the corner, sending me a glare. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked sweetly, and may I add, a bit too sweet. "Oh, I'll have whatever my boyfriend is getting," I chirped as she turned her attention on me, making sure I emphasized on the word my to make it clear that Aiden was mine. Amusement flashed in his eyes as I watched the waitress snarl at me before returning her innocent smile towards Aiden. "Just spaghetti please," he answered her previous question as she nodded thoughtfully, And your friend would like the same, right? She questioned, annoyed. Aiden was about to speak up until I beat him to it. Yes, his girlfriend would like the same. Once she left, I rolled my eyes in annoyance whilst Aiden had a wide grin plastered on his handsome face. Why are you smiling? He smirked. You were jealous. I scoffed. No. Davina. I let out a whimper. Maybe just a little. He managed to burst out a laugh as I rolled my eyes again, throwing a napkin at his sexy face as he swiftly caught it in time. His eyes glinted in amusement whilst I'm sure mine was glowing with annoyance. After a few minutes later, the same waitress came back with our order, shoving my bowl in front of me before slowly placing one in front of Aiden. She stood there, waiting for us to order something else whilst I was assuming she was waiting for Aiden to talk to her. I cleared my throat and yet she paid no attention to me whatsoever as I pushed my wolf back down whilst she tried to crawl up to the surface. She's not my type. His voice rung inside my head. I cocked my eyebrow at him as he chuckled silently before looking up towards a beaming Brianna, a blank facade falling over his face. Can my girlfriend and I eat in peace? Brianna blushed in embarrassment before scurrying off towards the other customers. During those 2 hours, Aiden had ordered wine for us as we sipped on it casually whilst we used that time to get to know each other better, which consisted of our likes and dislikes. I found out that there was going to be a Becoming an Alpha party tomorrow night and we were expected to attend since the host was one of Aiden's closest friends. Aiden and I made our way outside as the chilly breeze slammed into my face. Aiden placed my arm around my shoulders, pressing his warm, soft lips to my ear. You look beautiful tonight, he murmured whilst guiding us towards his car. Actually, you look beautiful every day. I chuckled as we both got into the car, a comfortable silence settling upon us before allowing the classical music flow around the atmosphere. My eyelids growing heavy. I was now woken up by someone lifting me up in a bridal style kind of way. I peeked through my eyelids to find Aiden's jawline clenching and unclenching. I smirked and kissed his jawline, making him shakily breathe in and out. In the corner of my eyes, I could already see that Aiden and I entered our bedroom. He placed me down on the bed and looked at me with lust in his eyes. I smiled and pecked his lips before retreating back to the closet until I felt a strong hand grip my wrist and pushed me against the wall. I bit my lip on purpose as Aiden's eyes traveled towards them, feeling a bulge in between my thighs. Our bodies were pressed against each other. His lips kissed my forehead, traveling around my face, and past my lips until they made their way towards my neck. He sucked and bit my flesh as I moaned softly, throwing my head back a bit so I could give him more access. I love you, the words tumbled out of my lips. Aiden's eyes snapped towards mine, genuine happiness and lust filling his eyes once more. Do you really? I nodded without hesitation. I love you, he replied in a quiet voice before his lips brushed against mine. I yearned for him. I arched my back towards him as his lips crashed onto mine, fully devouring them. His tongue brushed my bottom lips as I opened my mouth to give him permission to slip his tongue through. Our tongues massaged each other as I moaned in our kiss multiple times. I could feel the warmth in my body and the urge to feel Aid inside me. Suddenly, the clothes became a huge barrier in between us. He lifted me up by my tights as I instinctively wrapped them around his torso, feeling a hard bulge in between my inner thighs but closer to my wet center. Aiden placed me down on the bed gently, quickly taking off my cardigan and my singlet as he crashed his lips down to my bare chest. I moaned at the sudden pleasure as he didn't even struggle to take off my bra. I felt his tongue roll around my hard nipple, biting and sucking on it as I moaned, arching my back into him. My hands found their way under his shirt as I ran my fingers softly against his abs whilst he exhaled shakily, off. He knew what I meant as he took off his white shirt, throwing it on the floor before taking off his jeans. I swiftly took my clothing off of my body and also threw it on the floor. The bulge was evident in his gray boxers as his black, lust eyes roamed around my half-naked body as I suddenly felt insecure. Aiden crashed his lips in between my breasts, licking and sucking on every bit of my skin as I closed my eyes and moaned at the delightful pleasure, my fingers tugging on his hair. His soft lips traveled down towards my wet center, cupping my clit as I moaned loudly and held tightly onto the bed sheets. I could see the amusement in Aiden's eyes as he stroked it ever so gently. "You're so beautiful," he whispered seductively, his head swooping down to my center. His soft lips placed soft kisses on my inner trembling thighs before kissing the top of my clit. Before I could register what was even happening, he slipped his tongue inside, causing me to clench the bed sheets tighter at my sides whilst moaning at the surging pleasure. I felt the absence of his mouth, looking down to see his dark eyes, glinting with amusement and desire before licking his lips once more, then diving in again. I moaned as my breaths became shorter, my legs beginning to tremble as I felt something building up in my pelvis as I arched my back off the bed. Wanting more of him, I grinded on his mouth, my eyes fluttering close as my fingers were starting to hurt from clenching the bed sheets. I released as my legs now started to relax before I tugged his hair forward, followed by his body as we were face to face whilst I felt the heavy weight of my mate on top of me. His soft lips crashed onto mine once again, warmth coursing through my body as he fumbled around with the nightstand drawer before giving up as he cursed into our kiss. "Fuck it," he said. He placed both of his hands on top of my head and kissed my forehead softly before I felt something enter my body. "Another night of extraordinary bliss. Are you going to the celebration tonight?" Julia asked as we watched 3 training groups in front of us do a whole variety of moves. "Yes, I have to," I answered with a smile. "I am the Luna after all." When I woke up this morning, Aiden was gone to a meeting with some of the other alphas that had a pack close to his territory. He informed me that he was going to discuss the threats and attacks that were happening lately. I was also asked by Ace to watch over the training groups since Aiden wouldn't be there to supervise. "Well, I guess we are attending it together," Julia replied, beaming at me as I kept my eyes focused on a group of wolves whilst she trailed beside me. I shot her a confused look. "I am the beta's mate after all." I laughed and nodded, spotting Stacy standing in between 2 handsome, built men. She was not flirting like she was used to, which was strange. Julia must have noticed as well because we swapped confused looks with one another but quickly allowed it to slide. It was just after lunch that Aiden had been gone since 5:45 a.m. I sighed, longing for his presence as Julia and I ascended the porch and entered the pack house, a warm atmosphere settling. My eyes danced around for Rachel, but she was nowhere to be seen. "When does Rachel return home?" I asked Julia as we both grabbed a bottle of water each from the fridge. "She hasn't said anything about returning," Julia answered before taking a sip from the bottle. "In fact, she hasn't mentioned anything about returning to Australia." I narrowed my eyebrows in confusion. How can she stay away from her mate for so long? And her pup for that matter. I nodded and sauntered back outside to see the training groups already heading towards the pack house, each acknowledging me as they walked past. Stacy walked past us with an annoyed look plastered on her face as Julia and I gave each other confused looks again before following her to her, well, messy room. Her clothes were scattered all over her floor and her bed wasn't made yet. A non-familiar lingering scent crawled up my nostrils as I sniffed it out, trying to recognize it, yet it did not ring a bell. "Stacy, what's up?" I questioned, something nagging at the back of my head. "Nothing," Stacy stuttered. Julia frowned as she sat beside her sister on the bed. "Stacy," Julia said firmly before taking a huge sniff, which made Stacy immediately tense up. "Stacy, what is this unfamiliar scent?" Julia jumped off the bed, standing beside me angrily as my head began to hurt from trying to figure out what the scent was. Stacy ran a hand through her hair and sighed, standing up as her trembling hands clenched her purple sweatpants before her eyes met Julia's gaze. "I might have taken in a rogue." For a minute or so, I didn't know if I was dreaming, because the room went dead quiet. My head was immediately swarmed with questions as I looked at Julia, her mouth hanging open and her eyes filled with fury. Julia stormed towards the bedroom door and slammed it shut before retreating back to my side. "What do you mean by you have taken in a rogue?" Julia asked furiously. Stacy looked so vulnerable that at this point, tears were brimming her eyes. I set a hand on Julia's shoulder to calm her down before taking Stacy's hand into mine before looking into her eyes. Who's this rogue? Stacy mumbled incoherent words before Julia spoke up, louder, sister. I shot Julia a glare that she ignored. My mate. I was speechless as I could hear Julia's loud gasp before she bolted to her sister, pulling her into an embrace as she exclaimed, "I'm so happy for you." "He's a rogue, Stachi," I pointed out as Julia and Stachi pulled away from each other, both nodding sadly. "If Aiden knew about this, Moon Goddess knows what hell do to you and your mate. Davina, please, you have to help me," Stachi pleaded as I paced her room. "You are my only hope, and I swear he's not bad, I promise. I cannot afford to lose my mate. You know how that feels." I was taking in deep breaths as I questioned, "When did you take in this rogue, your mate?" "He was there when the rogues attacked our pack, and when I was about to get ripped into pieces, he was there to defend me," she answered quickly. "My wolf was chanting and I thanked the Moon Goddess. He's in the human city and he said he'll be back soon." I ran a hand through my hair and nodded. "Okay, if you want your mate to be alive then we need to talk to Aiden first thing tomorrow because tonight, Julia and I are attending a celebration. Keep him hidden." "Thank you, Davina." Stachi exclaimed in joy, jealousy flashing in her eyes, and before I knew it, it was gone. "Anything from my best friend," I whispered. I've never kept such a big secret from Aiden before, and to be honest, it was starting to kill me. I watched a black Range Rover drive in first, followed by Ace's Audi, then finally, a Ferrari, parking on one side of the pack grounds as I could feel the surge of happiness coursing through my body. I immediately started to drool, as Aiden climbed out of his car, in a brown leather jacket, black jeans, and a white V-neck t-shirt. I looked into the full-length mirror in front of me. I decided to wear a mid-length dress as violet flowers had covered most part of the dress, and as it got lower, the flowers began to separate. The hem was just plain white as I decided to complete the outfit with a pair of silver heels. I managed to curl my brunette hair and applied a light coat of makeup. The sweet scent of my mate crawled up my nostrils as I decided to hide in his closet, sliding the door in front of me so he wouldn't suspect a thing. The scent got closer every second of my life as I literally jumped in excitement to finally lay my eyes on my mate. The door to his closet slowly opened, and once it was halfway past my body, I jumped onto him, which had him laugh in surprise, his hands placed gently on my ass. "I missed you," I exclaimed, inhaling his delicious scent. His eyes glinted in happiness. "I missed you too, but we have a party to go to and am not prepared yet." I nodded, ushering him towards the bathroom located on the other side of the room whilst the guilt continued to eat me alive. He kissed my forehead quickly and closed the door behind him gently. Half an hour later, Aiden descended the staircase in a dark blue suit with a purple tie, his hair disheveled, giving him that handsome look as he shot me a sexy smirk. I stood in between Ian and Danny, who had been asked to come along for my protection, which I thought was kind of extreme, but I couldn't protest at all. "You look smokin' hot, dude," Ace's voice entered as well as his figure, his arms slumped around Julia's shoulders, who was wearing a plain, strapless, red top and a white, plain mini skirt with black heels. Ace, on the other hand, wore an all-black suit which I thought he was handsome in. "Thanks man, you look good too," Aiden complimented Ace weirdly as if he had never given him a compliment before. Ace pouted. "That's all I get. Babe, that's all I got." He turned to Julia, who rolled her eyes playfully before shooting me an award-winning smile. "My mate is hot." "She's beautiful," Ace whispered with a wink. Suddenly, Julia's eyes lit up before saying, "Alpha Aiden, give me your phone please." Adrian gave her a quizzed look before handing her his iPhone. My jaw dropped, realizing that I didn't have a phone. "Now Alpha, place an arm around Divina's waist and place your other hand in your pocket," Julia commanded as he obeyed. Once he placed his hand on my lower back, he settled his other hand in his pocket. "Divina, let an arm hang naturally and let the other rest on his shoulder," I nodded, biting my lip as I obeyed her commands. "Oh, and also bend one of your knees. Now, look into each other's eyes and literally just fucking smile. Now it was Ace's turn to command, feeling superior as Aiden gave him a death glare before staring into my eyes. His eyes immediately softened while Danny and Ian moved out of the way to stand next to Ace, trying to bite back their laugh. I felt tingles shoot through my body as a smile tugged the edges of my lips, whilst he looked at me as if I was the only person in the room, my heart fluttering. A minute later, I heard a camera click loudly multiple times before Julia began fumbling with his phone. "Here you go," Julia said with a grin as she handed Aiden back his phone. Aiden's eyes widened for a moment before looking at me. I cocked my head to the side before peering over the screen to only see a picture of the both of us that had just been taken, set as his lock screen. "It's also your home screen." I gave her a smile as if to say thank you before clapping excitedly. "Off we go." "Alpha Aiden and Luna Divina," Aiden said after rolling down his window to one of the Wolf Dirt Pack guards. It took 5 minutes, arguing if we should take the same car or separate ones, but unfortunately, Ace and Aiden had obviously won the argument so that we would be in separate cars because of their possessiveness. The ride has been an hour long, an hour of comfortable silence and chattering here and there. Aiden parked his Ferrari beside another expensive, beautiful car before rounding his own, opening the passenger door for me. I took his offered hand and stepped out of the car, my very own ears picking up music blasting from the enormous pack house that was located only a few meters away. I caught a glimpse of the lights illuminating the darkness as people laughed hysterically while walking in and out of the house. "Well, this is quite the party," I commented as Aiden chuckled before kissing my cheek. "I've never attended to a becoming an alpha celebration before only because my father thought I would fangirl over it and demand my own." Aiden laughed, along with Julia and Ace. We strolled across the pack grounds in the direction of the pack house as I caught the attention of unmated males, Aiden's arms snaking around my waist possessively before giving them cold looks. I smiled and patted his arm that rested on my waist as we stepped inside the less crowded pack living room. "Alpha Aiden," a man exclaimed, placing down a bottle of beer on a table before man-hugging my mate. The man's eyes roamed around my face before realization slammed into him like a tsunami, his eyes wide and his mouth hanging open. "You must be Luna Divina." "Divina, meet Alpha Henry, soon to be former Alpha," Aiden introduced as I smiled politely. Henry had wrinkles here and there, around his eyes and mouth when he smiled. His black hair brought out his pale complexion, yet his hazel eyes stood out amongst everything else. "I'm so glad you could make it. My son will be very happy to know that the strongest alpha attended his ceremony. Shall we go meet him?" Aiden nodded before kissing the side of my temple. "I'll be back, babe." I nodded as Julia came to my side whilst we watched our mates fade into the distance. She sighed dramatically and reached out just as Ace turned around a corner, whimpering in sadness. "Julia, he'll be back," I commented with a chuckle as she shrugged. We made our way towards the back of the pack house where the main celebration was, Ian and Danny shadowing my every move now that Aiden was gone. I gave Alpha Sean a little wave when our eyes met as he gave me a nod in response. It's been a good 10 minutes, but I could tell that I was already yearning for my mate's presence, unless... "Yes bitch, I'm back. My wolf, Delilah," exclaimed in joy. "Never thought I'd miss you so much. Welcome back. How is our mate? You missed out on pleasure." My wolf growled in annoyance as I disconnected myself from her with a grin. A small hand that gripped my wrist caught my attention as I whipped my head to the side to see Julia clutching her stomach, whimpering in pain. My heartbeat accelerated as Danny and Ian rushed over towards us in concern. "What's wrong, Julia?" "I need the bathroom," she managed to answer. I nodded. Since Ian and Danny had been here before, they insisted that they would lead her to the bathroom that just happened to be around the corner. I followed, watching Julia puke her guts out for a few minutes before she rinsed her mouth and washed her face. Julia came out, flushed and embarrassed as I sniffed her out, a familiar scent crawling up my nostrils a few minutes later. My eyes widened in shock as I placed both of my hands on her fragile shoulders. "You're pregnant." Julia's gaze went to the floor and nodded before answering with, "Ace doesn't know yet, but I'll tell him." I was actually hoping I could tell him today, but everything's come up and... I'll help you find him now, I interrupted. I took her hand and dragged her outside to the back where I saw many lunas, beta females, alphas and betas. My eyes danced around the crowd for Ace until I saw him conversing with a built man. Stay, I commanded as Julia nodded, biting her lip. I rushed downstairs as fast as my heels could carry me, before placing an arm on Ace's bicep. I need to take my beta away for a moment. The man politely nodded before disappearing into the crowd, Ace giving me a worried look. What's wrong, Luna? Did something happen to Julia? I shook my head. No, but she has something very important to tell you. She's just by the porch. Ace nodded, giving me a thank you before informing me with, oh, and if you're looking for Aiden, he's with 2 other alphas near the fire. I nodded and ushered him towards Julia, who was waiting for him. I turned on my heel and pushed my way past the crowd, muttering either sorry or excuse me. My wolf connected herself to me, feeling her excitement inside my body. Just as I caught a glimpse of the light from the bright fire, I found Aiden standing right before me as happiness suddenly coursed through my body. Until it completely shattered. I stared at them for at least a minute or so I could register the image of what was before me in my head. One of Aiden's arms was placed gently on the blonde-haired woman's waist as she laughed at one of his jokes, and right before my eyes, she kissed his lips, yet he does not react, a blank facade falling over his face before pulling away. The world under my feet completely stopped. A part of me wanted to go rip her throat as my blood boiled in anger, but another part of me thought that maybe Aiden was the type of person to juggle women around, even if he had his own mate. As if sensing something, his eyes danced around the crowd for what seemed like ages until they landed on me. Right before I could see him do anything, I pivoted around and headed towards the pack house, losing myself inside the crowd. You know, we caused a lot of problems for him and his pack because of our blood, my wolf whined as I swallowed the lump that had been stuck in my throat, shaking my head as I disconnected myself from my wolf. I plastered on a blank facade and found Ian and Danny, chatting up with some women. I chuckled and tapped them both on their shoulders, watching them turn around with horrified looks on their faces. I let out a laugh. I promise I won't tell Aiden that you let me out of your sight. They both exhaled in relief before flashing me an award-winning smile, handing me a bottle of water as I chugged it down greedily. Just before I could say anything else, a loud howl of wolves interrupted the chatters and laughter as 2 lines of wolves formed, circling a teenage boy no older than 19. Ladies and gentlemen, Alpha Henry's voice boomed across his enormous backyard, capturing many attention, including my own. I will now be stepping down from the alpha position, and the rising alpha of Wolf Dirt Pack will be my son, Kevin John. Applause and cheers erupted for the new alpha as a weird feeling tingled all around my body, turning my attention back on Kevin as his eyes lingered on me for a few moments before shifting into his big, tan wolf. He let out a howl before the wolves that had circled him joined, which led to another loud applause. The crowd went back to their business a few minutes later so that Kevin and his pack members could shift back into their human forms. Julia came into view with Ace's hand wrapped possessively around her waist, an annoyed facial expression plastered on his face. Ace, aren't we a bit possessive tonight? I questioned as he huffed. I chuckled and turned my attention to Julia, who was studying me. Congratulations, Jules. Did we miss something? Danny asked, a wide smile plastered on his face as his eyes roamed around the couple curiously. Your head if you lay a finger on my mate, Ace answered. Impregnant, Julia declared quietly. How long? I asked, wiggling my eyebrows. It's been 2 weeks, she answered with a smile. I nodded, biting my lip as I looked around nervously for Aiden, my wolf howling in discomfort. What's wrong? Julia questioned worriedly, the 3 men giving me confused looks. Guys, we need to talk about girls' stuff. In a blink of an eye, the 3 men were already out of our sights as I chuckled in amusement before leading her inside the pack house. I allowed Julia to sit on one of the white sofas as I sat beside her, sighing heavily. I saw someone kiss Aiden, I answered her previous question. Her brown eyes widened before quickly adding, but I turned away so I don't know what happened afterwards. I'm sorry, Julia whispered, squeezing my shoulder. He'll explain, don't worry, and if it's a shit one, well get the girls to kick his ass. I let out a nervous laugh. He better have a good explanation. I managed to slip out of bed at 4 in the morning, an hour early before Aiden woke up since I couldn't stand being in the same room as him even though my wolf practically begged me to. I descended the staircase as I immediately headed towards the woods, shifting into my wolf form so that Delilah was able to express her anger and sadness. Last night, after everything that had happened, Julia and I arrived home safely with Danny and Ian, right before the party ended without notifying Aiden. I had been informed that Ace was going to follow us since he didn't want to leave his pregnant mate behind, but instead, he left his alpha, which was a first for him. I wanted to avoid Aiden as much as I possibly could to gather my thoughts, but knowing that he was my other half, it was impossible. I shifted back into my human form behind a thick tree after 3 hours of my run. I quickly slipped on a pair of black sweatpants and a loose, white t-shirt, ignoring the fact that I didn't have a bra on. I knew it was only around 7 and the sun was just rising as I made my way back towards the mansion, my eyes dancing around as pack guards began to change their shifts. I stepped inside the house, a familiar delicious scent crawling up my nostrils as I fought the urge to ascend the staircase and hug the life out of Aiden, but I restrained myself from doing such thing. I strolled into the kitchen, grabbing the first thing my eyes laid on, which happened to be a toast that had just popped up from its cave. I leaned against the counter with one of my arms hugging my stomach whilst I devoured the toast. "That's my toast," a husky, masculine voice announced the obvious. I opened one of my eyes to see Aiden's eyes turning black, then slowly back to brown as I inwardly drooled at how hot he looked in his outfit, which consisted of a black V-neck shirt that clung to his sculpted body and a pair of denim jeans. I tilted my head in confusion, wondering why his eyes were like that. I looked down to see that the arm was hugging my stomach was basically showing off my nipple. I looked up and smirked. "That's good to know. We didn't get to talk last night since you left so early and..." "There's nothing to talk about," I interrupted, a blank facade falling over my face before I slipped past him. I jumped on the white sofa and relaxed, closing my eyes in comfort. I suddenly felt a hot breath fanning my face as my eyes fluttered open, squeaked at the handsome face that was smirking down at me. Aiden sat on the floor, his beautiful brown eyes looking up at me as he spoke. "Just in case you wanted to know, that woman had a mate and she was really drunk. You know I love you and only you," I scoffed. "Wolves can't get drunk." He rolled his eyes playfully. "They can, but only if they drink far too much, and in her case, she had. She thought I was her mate and everything, so she kissed my lips, but can I tell you how disgusting it was even though it was just a touch?" I bit back my smile. "Anyway, after I saw that you have completely ran away, I felt all your emotions and trust me, it was too much to handle. I'm really sorry." "Doesn't explain why your arm was resting on her waist," he sighed. "It was a dare one of my oldest friends told me to do." I rolled my eyes. "Childish. Forgive me, love." I now sat up with my legs crossed as I cleared my throat before looking down at my mate who was pulling on a puppy face. I groaned as my inner wolf pushed me to forgive our mate. "Fine, whatever." He shot me an award-winning smile before pulling me down to him, our lips crashing together as the sparks ignited between us. I wrapped my legs around his waist and smiled into the kiss as it deepened. "Davina," I heard a shaky, familiar feminine voice. Aiden pulled back in irritation, his eyes full of lust and desire. I kissed his cheek before rising from his lap as I approached the hallway to see Stachi looking presentable for once. She was wearing faded, blue jeans and a black turtleneck tank top with her hair tied up in a high ponytail. I cocked my head to the side in confusion before she gave me that look. A sudden wave of realization washed over me as my mouth formed a perfect O. "Be right back," I whispered before ascending the staircase. I slipped into a black t-shirt dress that reached only mid-length of my thighs before quickly putting on a pair of ankle boots. I left my hair in a messy bun, before quickly descending the staircase to see Stachi, her head hanging in front of Aiden, who was crossing his arms with a confused look. "As your alpha, I demand you to tell me what is going on," I heard Aiden say just as I stepped beside him, squeezing his forearm gently. "Something's shifty. As your Luna, I command you to not listen to your alpha for the day," I said teasingly, with a smile as Aiden shot me a playful glare. I reached for Stasis' shaking arm and squeezed it tightly, trying to reassure her that everything will be fine. "Let's go into his office, shall we?" Stacky nodded, speechless as I guided her towards Aiden's office, letting her sit down comfortably on the seat in front of his desk as Aiden made his way behind his table, plopping down casually. I looked beside me, feeling a bit strange since I've never seen Stacy act this way. "I would like to tell you, Alpha Aiden, something, and I hope you will not be mad at the Luna for keeping this from you." Stasis' voice trembled as her fearful eyes met with Aiden's hard gaze, a blank facade falling over his face. I closed my eyes and exhaled, trying to feel any emotion from him, but when my eyes fluttered open, his unreadable eyes told me that he had already blocked me out. My wolf whimpered in sadness, but I kept on a brave face for the sake of Stacy. "What is it?" Aiden questioned, his tone cold as his eyes stayed on mine. A shiver crawled around my body as I gulped quietly. The guilt that I pushed away was now returning to haunt me. "I have found my mate," Stachi answered without hesitation, her face softening. "I don't understand how this affects me," Aiden replied, cocking an eyebrow. I held back the urge to slap the back of his head for being a dickhead. "Female wolves go through hormones too." Stachi took an audible gulp before her gaze hardened, finishing her sentence with, "On the day of the rogue attack." I observed Aiden's every move, his cold eyes snapping to Stachi, who whimpered under his gaze as his fist slammed against his desk. "Stachi," and I flinching at the sudden sound before Stachi clung onto me for support. "What did you say, Stasi?" he questioned in his alpha tone. All I wanted to do at this moment was to crawl under my bed covers and never come out. "My mate's a rogue," she trailed off as she took in a deep breath before continuing. "His presence is in your territory as we speak, for I have taken him in." That had Aiden shoot out of his chair as he sped past, nearly knocking the doors off its hinges before yelling at the pack guards, that were patrolling around the house, to find the rogue immediately. Once I got in step with him, the guards had already scattered and I was sure that Ace was with them along with a pack tracker. It wasn't really necessary to have a whole group of them since Stasis' mate was here anyway. I placed a hand on Aiden's back, attempting to calm him down in any way that I could, but he only tensed under my touch and stormed off without a glance back. Shifting into his wolf, he disappeared into the forest to join the hunt for Stasis' mate. A pain formed in my chest as I let out a whimper before turning around to see Stasis' face full of guilt. "I'm sorry, Davina, I didn't mean to," she whispered softly, tears brimming her sad eyes. I shook my head and pulled her into a hug as we embraced each other as if we were going to be ripped apart. A few minutes later, we were joined by Rachel and Julia, who had been informed of Stasis' situation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rachel questioned, once we all pulled away, hurt laced with her voice. "I could have helped too. I wasn't planning on telling anyone, but Davina and Jules just forced it out of me," Stachi answered softly with a little bit of tease to lighten up the mood. "Well, we need to find this mate of yours, or Luna Davina and Beta female, Julia. We have caught the rogue and Alpha Aiden requested both and Stachi Hill's presence," George announced, interrupting Rachel as she growled quietly. I nodded, motioning for Julia and Stachi to follow him. I was about to ask Rachel to come, but she spoke up first. "I got some things to deal with back at home, so I'll catch up with you later." I nodded before jogging up to the trio who has been waiting for me outside. The walk to the pack dungeons was long as the deadly silence was eating me alive. I looked to my left to see Stacy trembling in fear and Julia, pity written all over her face. I sighed and walked into the pack dungeons as Ian and Danny followed closely behind. We walked past at least 3 or 4 cells before reaching to a small, circular space. 2 silver chains were holding an arm each as the limp body was placed against the brick wall. I frowned and found Aiden with his arms crossed over his chest, Ace beside him with his hands behind his back with a blank facade. "What's happening?" I questioned, standing in front of Aiden. "We're killing him," Aiden answered with no hesitation as he didn't even dare to meet my gaze. I bit my lip and snapped my eyes to Stassi, wanting to see her reaction to Aiden's cold words. Her eyes widened as her jaw dropped, Julia holding her sister back from doing anything stupid. My mind reared back to yesterday, knowing that if I promised to help Stassi in any way that I could, also knowing that she would do the same for me if she was in the same position as me. I cleared my throat and rolled back my shoulders, beginning to square up. I grabbed Aiden's arm without warning, and used all of my strength to drag him outside the pack dungeons. Once we were outside, he halted in his steps immediately, which made me fall back, but before I could hit the ground, Aiden's arms instantly wrapped themselves around my waist. I smiled as he helped me stand upright before I turned around to face him. "He's Stasis' mate and I promised her that nothing would happen to him," I said, folding my arms in front of me as Aiden's unreadable eyes snapped to mine. "She promised he wouldn't hurt me or anyone else in this pack. As a matter of fact, look, I know you had your own thing going on before I came, and that was to kill rogues to avenge your sister. I know you don't believe in second chances, but please do this for me and let him go." He ran a hand through his messy hair before placing his hands on my shoulders, squeezing it tightly as my eyes softened. "You're right, I don't do second chances, but Davina, I've lost so many people I've cared about to the fucking rogues and I cannot lose you," he breathed. His hand caressed my cheek as I leaned into his hand, smiling softly as he continued, "No way in hell, because I love you so goddamn much. Moon Goddess knows what I would do if you were ever taken away from me." My heart melted as my inner wolf purred. "You won't lose me, Aiden. I promise." He looked at me with warmth, his eyes softening as I knew he was fighting with himself in his head. To make matters easier, I stepped closer to him so that our bodies were pressed together. I smiled, placing soft kisses along his jawline, then trailing down to his neck. His hands found their way to my waist whilst he exhaled shakily before pulling away from me ever so slightly. He softly growled before connecting his forehead with mine. "Fine, but if he harms anyone in my pack or especially you, he's done for," Aiden whispered in a husky voice as I chuckled before wrapping my arms around his neck. "Oh, the shit I do for you." I threw my head back and laughed as he placed a kiss on my throat before pulling away and sighed. "Guess he'll break the news to them now." I nodded, shoving him inside as he let out a genuine smile in my direction before replacing it with a cold snarl, taking in a deep breath as he walked back inside. "It's been a week since I allowed that stupid, little-ass rogue stay in my pack. He has not yet done the trial, but Ace thought he should do it soon, just in case one of my pack members gets a little freaked out. My beautiful mate has been looking after Julia, attending to her needs whilst Stassi spent a lot of time with her mate, Ben. Is everything alright, Alpha?" Danny asked, observing me with worry and concern before bowing to me in submission. I nodded my head in response, a blank facade falling over my face. I sensed Divina's happiness through our bond as my wolf purred. I looked up to see Danny gathering his things already as I spoke up. "Do you have any information on the rogue?" "Ben is a former member of Wolf Dirt," Danny answered immediately. "He was shunned out because he had accidentally slept with the beta's mate. I also found out that Stassi is his second mate since his first had died in a rogue attack." "Wolf Dirt?" I questioned myself. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration and nodded. "That's all for today. Make sure you attend to your Luna's needs." Danny bowed in submission again before leaving my office as I shrunk into my comfortable chair and sighed heavily, looking at 3 piles of papers on my desk. Ever since I had released Ben, the word has been spread to all the packs around the entire world that the vicious Moonbloods Alpha has allowed a rogue to escape, which led to my pack members confused but never questioning their loyalty to me. I walked out of the house in need for fresh air and my mate sent to calm me down. I walked around the pack grounds, observing every child who were enjoying themselves happily with each other as the thought of Bria suddenly crossed through my mind. My wolf saddened at the loss of his twin as I clenched my fists at my side. If it wasn't for Davina, I would have ripped Ben into shreds. I looked up at the sky with my hands inside my pocket as I thought to myself, I'm sorry Bria, but I promise, I won't let any other rogues go. I hope you can forgive me, Alpha. A familiar, masculine voice shouted as I sighed and pivoted around to see Ace running to me, a smile plastered on his face. Ace, I said in acknowledgement, something wrong. I named my pup, he exclaimed happily. If it's a male, it's going to be Dominic, and if it's a girl then it'll be Aura. I nodded my head in approval as we headed towards the pack house. Many pack members either bowed their heads in my direction or nod at me in submission. Sounds good, Ace. Is there going to be a mini Aiden and Davina soon? Ace questioned, wiggling his eyebrows as I rolled my eyes. Soon, I answered quietly, causing him to burst out in laughter. I headed towards the pack house to see many of my pack members of all ages crowding around Julia, who was grinning widely. Ace chuckled before making his way towards her, taking a seat beside her as they all cheered for him. I sighed, but just as I was about to turn around, a delicious scent crawled up my nostrils as small hands covered both of my eyes, my tense body relaxing under its soft touch. Guess who? A familiar, beautiful voice rung next to my ears, my wolf perking up in joy. Wow, that's kind of hard, I answered teasingly, faking a dramatic sigh as the hands were immediately taken off my eyesight. The small figure stood in front of me with a pout, my wolf growling in hunger. You're an idiot, Davina whispered as she took a step forward. My arms wrapped around her small waist without hesitation and pulled her close, inhaling her scent, tucking her head under my chin before replying with, I'm your idiot. You're so cheesy, Davina teased, pulling away slightly before looking up at me with her blue, piercing eyes. I grinned in satisfaction. Good, you know we can always go back to bed and... Davina blushed furiously, slapping a hand over my mouth as I chuckled at her silliness before hissing at me, shut the fuck up. I cocked an eyebrow at her choice of words and nodded. Alpha, my third in command, called as he stepped into view. Can we talk, please? I nodded, looking down to see Davina stepping out of my arms as my wolf whimpered in sadness, already yearning for her touch. She blew a kiss towards me which I had caught gladly before retreating back to the pregnant beta female side. I plastered on a blank facade before turning to the man who needed to speak with me. I led him outside the pack house, Ace trailing behind. What is it? James, the third in command, gulped before answering with, there is to be an alpha and beta meeting in less than an hour at BlueMoon's. It's a last-minute decision, but they have requested for your presence. I sighed and nodded. Of course. I turned to Ace, concern written all over his face before ordering him with, Ace, get the cars ready, and James, you're in change until I return. Fists clenched at my sides, I could hear Ace trying to restrain himself from releasing a growl. All the alpha and beta's eyes were focused on the both of us, waiting for a response. Alpha Aid, is it true that your mate holds the blood that could endanger all of our packs? You know, the one from the legend? Alpha Frederick repeated his question with a frown. I rolled my shoulders back, keeping a blank stare but also at the same time wondering how word had spread so fast if only a few knew of Davina. What will you do if I confirm that statement? Alpha Frederick looked around at all the alphas that had worried looks before clearing his throat, then turned his attention towards Ace and I. Alpha Aiden, we respect you for being the strongest and feared alpha, but the power that your Luna can destroy us all. Alpha Sean cleared his throat, my eyes snapping to my mate's second trusted man. Luna Davina is powerful, yes, but she will never ever hurt anyone, and I know that because Alpha Nick, her father, was a very close friend of mine. Alpha Frederick slammed his fists on the table, causing all the betas to flinch but Ace at the sudden action. Alpha Nick could have died from her blood. She could have been his killer. My wolf released a low growl at the accusation he just made as I made sure my tone was hard and cold before responding with, my mate is no killer to the people she loves. Luna Divina's blood cannot hurt her mate. her family and her pack that she has connected herself to, so therefore, she cannot be Alpha Nick's killer. Alpha Frederick frowned slightly. Your pack might be safe, but what about ours? I ran a hand through my hair in frustration, yet kept a blank face. If you take a sip of her blood, then only Moon Goddess knows what will happen, but that is not my responsibility. I could practically see steam coming from Alpha Frederick's ears as his beta's face held a deadly stare whilst the other alphas shifted in their seats, for the tension in the air was thick. After contemplating decisions with himself, he finally stood up from his seat and glared at me. There is no more peace between our packs. We will destroy your back, and especially the Luna herself. The blank expression was wiped off of my face as I abruptly stood up and growled whilst Ace kept a firm hand on my shoulder. My wolf was in a frenzy at the thought of Davina getting hurt. You dare think that you will win? You are up against the world's strongest pack. Well, see, Alpha Frederick responded, holding a devilish smirk that tempted me to connect my fist with his face in a blink of an eye. I'll not rest till your Luna is dead and wiped off this earth's existence. I scoffed, my eyes turning deadly. And I'll be the one to strike your pack in the blink of an eye, and then you'll all be on your knees, begging for mercy. Gentlemen, please calm down, Alpha Sean said in a voice full with authority. I will not have you shed your blood on my grounds, so this meeting is officially over. I now announce that the peace between the Moonbloods and Wolf Hunt are finished right here and now, unless you both say otherwise. Everyone cocked their eyebrows at us, but before any one of them could change our minds, Alpha Frederick spat with, "Never." And with that, he stormed out with his beta behind. The other alphas nodded before leaving, their betas hot on their heels as some gave Ace and I smile whilst others gave us glares. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration again before accidentally letting the wall inside my head down that separated Davina from my emotions and thoughts. Fuck, Aiden, are you okay? Davina's beautiful voice asked with worry as I only chuckled through the mind link. Well, talk once I get home, love. And with that, I immediately disconnected our mind link and sighed heavily. A strong hand rested on my shoulder as I instantly tensed at the foreign feeling, looking up to see Alpha Sean's face, concern written all over it. He sat down on the chair opposite of me before signaling to his beta to wait for him outside whilst I nodded my head in Ace's direction. Alpha Aiden, we both care for Davina, right? Alpha Sean questioned as I stared at him as if he had just grown 2 heads. I nodded. He sighed. My pack will align with yours as long as we can keep Davina safe. If Alpha Frederick attacks at any moment, please reach out to me, it'll be of use to you. I only nodded, standing up before shaking his hand. Thank you, he nodded. All for Davina's safety. Not only do I have to watch out for Raymond and his rogue pack, but for another that had once been a friend of mine. Fuck. To be shocked would be an understatement. I was horrified, and yet for the first time in weeks or even months, I was scared to death. Aiden and Ace had returned about 2 hours ago, anger radiating off the both of them when they had walked in. Pack members of all sorts were genuinely concerned for their alpha and beta, but at the same time, they were scared shitless. Aiden had called in all of us before he explained that now all the other alpha knew about the blood that ran deep in my veins. Julia, Stachi, Danny and Ian also knew since Aiden had invited them, letting them know what they are up against when they were protecting me. It took an hour to at least explain everything in detail, and now, I'm sitting on my sofa with my jaw hanging open, my eyes widened. My mouth was opening and closing like a dead fish as I observed the other confused faces in the silent room. How? I managed to whisper, all heads snapping in my direction at the sound of my voice. Aiden sighed, moving closer to me before swinging an arm around my shoulders as he kissed my temples. I don't know. It doesn't matter now, Ace spoke up, determination shone in his eyes as Julia clung onto his arm, nodding furiously as if they were talking about their child. Our top priority is the Luna, and we will keep her safe at all costs. I think we need to kill some bitches, Stachi pointed out before cracking her knuckles, then moved onto her neck as if she was going to wrestle. Once we heard the front door open, each and every body stiffened, our lips completely sealed. Our necks craned to the side to see the masculine figure with a blank facade, his hands inside his pockets with his black t-shirt clinging to his built body. My eyes were especially focused on his facial expression, my thoughts moving towards my father as my eyes suddenly widened at the resemblance between the two. "Hello," Jake greeted, his eyes focused on me. My thoughts were already trained off. "Hey Jake, what brings you here?" "I was hoping to speak to the Alpha," Jake answered in a monotone, his eyes traveling towards Aiden, who cocked his eyebrow before nodding. "Everyone's dismissed," Aiden declared before retreating back to his office, Jake in tow. Julia and Ace left to go for a walk whilst Stacy left to go see her mate. Danny and Ian refused to leave my side as we strolled into the kitchen, Rachel plopping down on the seat beside me. "It's pack business," Rachel said out of the blue as I raised my eyebrow in confusion. "When are you going home?" I asked, curiosity consuming me. Rachel's eyes shifted, her hazel turning dark as if a past was haunting her, but before I could decipher anything, she cleared her throat, plastering on a blank smile, and just like that, her eyes returned to their natural color. "Soon, my dear. I do miss my pup and my mate, but you're in danger and I know you need me at the moment." I nodded, shoving the thought of Rachel possibly hiding something. A churning feeling appeared in my stomach, rising in my throat as my legs on instinct rushed to the nearest toilet as I heaved everything out. A few minutes later, reassuring myself that I was okay, I groaned and stood up before rinsing my mouth. I headed towards the kitchen to see a bag of chips as I bit my lip and reached for it, ripped it open before shoving each and every piece down my throat. "Are you okay, Luna?" Danny asked as he strolled out of the pantry with an arm full of food as he snacked on a toast. My stomach grumped as I threw away the empty bag of chips before grabbing another from Danny. "Fine." Ian walked out of the pantry as well, his phone in his hands as he stared at me in confusion. I waved it off before having to need to stomp inside Aiden's office. I ripped the door open and growled as two men immediately snapped their attention towards me. Jake took a huge but silent sniff, his eyes darkening as his gaze snapped to my stomach then back to his Alpha. On the other hand, Aiden's eyes softened before giving me a wink. "Davina, that's not healthy for you," Aiden pointed out the obvious as I glared at him, tears brimming my eyes. "Alpha, could I speak to the Luna for a bit?" Jake asked, keeping his gaze on the bag of chips in my hands. Aiden's eyes darkened and clenched his fists. No? I questioned. I turned to Jake and smiled before adding, "Sure." I gave one quick glare in Aiden's direction before stomping out of the house to only hear a crash coming out of it. I rolled my eyes as I led Jake and myself to one of the logs that was situated outside the house. The sudden warm breeze slammed into my face as my eyes danced around the empty pack grounds, knowing that the pack members were all inside for lunch. I sat down, stretched my legs before turning my attention onto Jake, whose eyes was still dark, his fists clenching and unclenching. "Hello, little sister." "What?" My little sister's eyes widened at my previous words. "What?" she questioned, her blue eyes widening in pure shock. I sighed before shaking my head a little. "I'm your brother, have to be exact." Her blue eyes studied me carefully before she broke into hysterical laughs whilst punching my biceps simultaneously. I cocked my eyebrow to prove that I was not joking, and when her eyes met mine, her smile faded as she straightened up her posture. "Dad will never cheat on Mom, they're mates," she stated the obvious. "I know Davina, but before they were mates," I said, looking at her closely as she played with her brunette hair, her eyes observing me. "What happened?" she asked quietly. I swallowed my saliva, my wolf disconnecting himself from me as it was too painful to endure. I shut my eyes for a minute or so to calm the pounding in my head before opening my eyes to only see Davina watching me with such curiosity. "Before your mom met our dad, he was some sort of player," I started, taking in a deep breath. "He met my mom in a club and she happened to be a rogue. He was very drunk and of course, he started doing some things with her, then she found out she was pregnant. I was dropped off at Golden Dreams because my mom knew that she couldn't take of me herself and she knew I would be better off with Dad. Divina's eyes widened as she bit her lip to stop it from trembling. Dad found me with DNA tests and everything so that it was proof, but yet, he let me grow up with other pack members. Never once did he check up on me. When I was 5, we found out that the Luna, your mom, was pregnant with you. Your mom found out about me a week later. She made the announcement because the resemblance between him and I were undeniably strong. I continued, remembering the weird look Divina gave me as if she was trying to figure it all out. She took me under her wing and looked after me, fed me, cared for me, and most of all, loved me with all her heart even though I was not her son. When you were born, I was only 6, but there was this one time where your dad was looking after you and your mom decided to come up to me. Her eyes grew in curiosity. The clear image in my head of Luna Shay's grinning face appeared in my head. She asked if anything ever happened to the pack, to her. It would be my job to protect you, like she did to me. But years went by and I was 11 and our dad thought you would soon remember me, so he kicked me out of the pack instantly without exchanging any words with his mate, and the next thing I knew, a woman took me in, and so now, I'm here, in the Moonbloods. Wow, she trailed off with a sigh, her hand clasped together in her lap. He was never horrible to me though. Ever since then, your mom kept me updated on the things you did, like when you first shifted, your first crush and everything girls do. I finished, ignoring her last sentence. That's creepy, Divina whispered, a ghost smile playing on her lips. I rolled my eyes. I wanted to know what kind of person you were growing into. Before Divina could say something, Alpha Aiden bolted out of the house as his eyes searched for his mate. I resisted the urge to get into my fighting stance when he marched towards us, his dark eyes and canines slowly growing. My heartbeat increased, fearful of what he might do to me. Stop! Before my sister could finish her sentence, her eyelids fluttered close, as every bones in her body grew weak, falling into her mate's arms. His grip on her tightened, a panic look flashed across his face before transforming into a cold glare, sweeping off of her feet into a bridal style. Pack hospital, now, he roared, and before I knew it, I was up and leading the way with the Alpha hot on my heels. The bright light blinded me as I fluttered my eyes open, slowly turning my head to the side to see Jake and Aiden with their heads buried in their hands. I gave John, the pack doctor, a confused look, but all he did was give me a proud smile before helping me sit upright. I groaned at the sudden dizziness as I placed a hand on my sweaty forehead and closed my eyes for a moment in attempt to chase the pain away. She's awake, Alpha, Aiden and Jake, John announced in a monotone. Aiden's and Jake's heads shot up in an instant. Divina, are you okay? Aiden asked immediately as he hurriedly rushed to my side and grabbed my hand. I allowed the tingles to crawl up my arm as I smiled at my mate. I'm okay. Jake kept a poker face on, but I could see a ghost smile playing on his lips. I tried talking to him with my eyes, asking if he told Aiden anything about the last conversation we had. He knows, Jake answered, making Aiden snap his neck to the side and glared at him. I laughed at how childish Aiden could be as I bit my lip and looked up to the doctor, who was watching with amusement in his eyes. Any news? I felt Aiden tense, and in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Jake's eyes darkening every silent second. But the doctor kept his smile wide as he looked down on his clipboard. Luna, you may be shocked to hear this, but you are carrying the next alpha of this pack. The world stopped spinning. My heartbeat increased as I could feel tears springing to my eyes. I could tell my hands were trembling as I pulled my hand out of Aiden's hold and placed them both gently on my stomach, my eyes focused on my flat stomach. I looked down to meet Aiden's brown, chocolate eyes as they held pride before he lowered his head a bit, placing a soft kiss on my stomach. A couple of clearing throats interrupted our moment as my wolf immediately growled out, wanting to rip them into shreds for ruining the moment. Congratulations, I cannot tell you the sex of it yet as you are only 3 weeks pregnant, John informed as he checked the clipboard again. When Alpha knew, he was quite shocked. How did you know I was pregnant? I asked with a trembling voice. The weird smell was coming from you, and also, I could tell you've been throwing up by the pale complexion, he answered with a soft smile. And of course later, he tests that I have received. John bowed in Aiden's direction before excusing himself. You got my sister pregnant? Jake questioned. Fury yet curiosity consumed his eyes. Didn't you use protection? I giggled at the questions that he threw at us as Aiden only rolled his eyes and sat down next to me, carefully placing an arm around my waist before Aiden and I decided not to answer his questions. You're being an overprotective brother, do you see that? Aiden questioned, a blank facade falling over his handsome features. Because she's my sister, Jake answered, cocking an eyebrow at Aiden before focusing his attention on me. Are you ready for this responsibility, Davina? I am, I answered confidently. But I wasn't expecting this. Who did? Jake asked rhetorically before sighing heavily as he left the room. I looked to my side where I caught Aiden giving me a smile. Are you ready to be a father? Hell yeah, he answered, giving me a wink before his eyes widened in realization. I need to raise the number of security now. I rolled my eyes. I'm safe with Ian and Danny. After an hour of hearing the big news, we decided to keep it and surprise the pack when I was due. Aiden had obviously rushed to the pack meeting along with Danny and Ian about my safety, which I thought wasn't necessary. My mind was racing as my hands kept moving in a circular motion around my stomach. I sighed, walking up the stairs until an unfamiliar scent caught my attention. I frowned, took a big sniff before continuing my way towards the black door. I placed my hand on the doorknob before turning it carefully. The door creaked softly as it opened, revealing the broken glass wall as the glass shards have shattered all over the bedroom floor. My heartbeat picked up as I took a closer step to the scene, the horrible scent getting stronger. I slowly turned my head towards the bed and saw a man in his 40s laying down with a wicked grin plastered on his face as I hitched my breath at how similar the resemblance between him and Aiden was. His dark gray eyes held mischief and the wrinkles were clearly visible on his forehead. Who are you? I asked lowly as my wolf was now fully alert. Davina Rosales, he spoke as if he owned the place, my name rolling off his tongue. So good to meet you, dear one. What the fuck do you want? I asked, clenching my fists as I crouched a bit, getting ready to shift if I needed to. The man raised an eyebrow at me before hopping off the bed swiftly, taking a big step towards me whilst I took a step back. His eyes held confusion before he took a big sniff of the air as if taking in all the oxygen around us before a devilish smirk appeared on his old face. A pup. My eyes widened yet I kept my face blank as he took a tiny step towards me. I dug my nails into the palm of my hands, my blood boiling, and my veins pumping in anger. How did you get in here without getting caught? That's a secret and it wouldn't be a secret anymore if I told someone, he answered casually as his claws grew. Now, you either surrender yourself or you can fight and may lose the pup inside of you. I growled as my wolf lent me her claws. I lunged towards him, hoping to do some damage but to only scratch his left cheek. His eyes darkened as fury was now evident in his eyes. He growled quietly, assuming to not attract any more attention from my pack members. Alpha, I think we've been caught. A man, similar to his age, made an appearance at the doorway. Stupid dumb-ass rogues these days, you can't even do your task right anymore. The man who was fighting me replied out loud. Tan, help me take care of this Luna but make sure no harm comes to her stomach. The man that appeared in the doorway, Tan, turned his attention on him as his eyes glowed red. My eyes widened at the sight and just before I could shift into my wolf, in a blink of an eye, Tan and the man lunged at me simultaneously, both slashing their claws on either side of my cheeks before one of them slammed my head hard against the bathroom door. My head pounded like crazy as I dropped to the floor. My vision was a blur and my ears were starting to ring loudly. Clear, dark spots appeared in my vision before my heavy eyelids forced themselves closed, letting the darkness swallow me whole. My head was pounding hard as I could feel the sweat trickle down my cheek. Or was it blood? I slowly opened my eyes and gagged at the horrible scent that had managed to crawl up my nostrils no later than 2 seconds. The smell of dead, rotten bodies, and overdue milk as if it hasn't been thrown away in years. I took in my surroundings as I was currently in a cell with big, thick metal bars just inches away from me, and the brick wall looked new, as if it was just built. It was silent. Too silent. "Are you okay, Davina?" my wolf asked with worry. "I'm fine, I just need to contact the others," I answered. My head continued to pound like crazy as I grimaced, trying to focus on the mind link, but failed to do so due to the pain that was coursing through my head. I groaned in frustration and decided to give up after a few seconds, knowing that I'll get the same results whatsoever. "Is the pup okay?" my wolf asked. My eyes widened as I looked down at my stomach and moved my hand in circular motions around it. The fear of losing my child, our child, was devastating, and I couldn't bear the thought of that. "I hope so," I answered her. I heard a few loud claps coming from the darkness that was from the far wall. I squinted my eyes in attempt to see something, but to no avail. I growled, and just a few seconds later, Tan, a girl with brunette hair tied up into a messy bun and her light-washed jeans painted in dirt as her white tank top was painted in blood, was holding another man's hand, Ben. The pain in my chest formed at the betrayal, but I kept my poker face on, staring right at Stachi, whose eyes held pity and guilt. I clenched my fists, not wanting to rage, knowing that they'll discover my weakness. "Stachi Hills, how could you?" I questioned, venom dripping down from every word that escapes my lips. "You betrayed your pack, your Luna, and your best friend." Stasis' face held no emotion whatsoever, but her eyes screamed it all. She was forced. My eyes snapped to her mate, Ben, who had black hair, not a very built muscular body, but muscular enough to be a wolf. He plastered on an ugly snarl, a wicked glint in his brown eyes that shined. "And to believe he wouldn't hurt me." "Raymond, what shall we do with Luna D?" Tan questioned. "Well, it'll take a while for my nephew to discover where we are," Raymond answered, his eyes raping my body as if I was naked. "Nephew?" I couldn't help but question. "Aiden Brooklyn is indeed my nephew," Raymond stated, taking 2 big steps closer to the metal bars and crouched down so that we were now eye level. I failed to do so many things to my sister-in-law, but I could always do them with my nephew's mate. "What do you think?" A cold shiver ran down my spine as I spat in his face, worrying about the consequences later. "You daughter of a bitch," Raymond snarled, taking a tissue from Tan. Raymond stood up, placing both of his hands behind his back, and smiled wickedly. "Did you know what your father had done to me?" I laughed humorlessly. "I know what Aiden will do to you all when he finds me." In the corner of my eye, I could see Stasis' eyes widen in fear, evident in her trembling. Raymond scoffed. "Your father killed off half of my rogue pack, the only family I have left." Now it was my turn to smile wickedly. "I really don't care," Raymond growled as he kept his evil eyes focused on me. "Your father didn't mention it to you because he knew that him and his family was on top of my revenge list. He didn't tell you anything that had to do with me because it was the only way to protect his precious, blooded daughter." I gulped, not wanting to respond as a thought crossed my mind. That was why he trained me at an early age, to help me prepare to fight an idiot like Raymond. "Well, see you tonight," Raymond whispered. "To see what's so special about your blood," and with that, he walked out the door with his minions following behind. I knew Stachi was staring at me on her way out, trying to capture my attention, but I had no reasons to forgive her for what she had done to me. I continued to look down at the disgusting floor until I heard the door slam shut. I looked up, wiping the tears that was running down my cheeks, missing the protection of my mate and his scent. It was right of him to increase the security. And I knew this was only just the beginning of my hell. It's been a whole 2 hours since Divina's gone missing. For real this time. The presence of Stacy and Ben had also disappeared, yet no one knew of their location. I clenched my fists and slammed it on my desk hard, only to result of breaking the table in half as I stormed out of the house to see George and his pack fighters approach me, exhausted. "Any traces of her?" I questioned, a blank facade falling over my face. "No, Alpha Aiden, Ken, the tracker," answered for George, who reappeared from the forest with his tracker group. "Another search," I commanded, but no one seemed to budge. I could feel the alpha voice rising in my throat as my wolf needed his mate in his sight, to see that she was safe. Now. And with that, the wolves nodded before shifting into their wolves, running off towards the forest again for the third time today. I rubbed my temples and looked around the pack grounds. The wind has gotten colder and the pack members had been locked inside, worrying about their Luna and praying for her safety to the moon goddess after hearing the news. A familiar scent crawled into my nostrils as I immediately turned around to see Ace, Rachel and Jake approaching me after slipping out of the car that had been parked to the side. Did you get them? I questioned Ace. He nodded. They're here. I nodded as the three of them went to stand behind me as I watched 6 black vans drive into the pack grounds, one by one as Alpha Sean and his beta, Luke, got out of the first van along with their best pack fighters. Alpha Sean's fists were clenched, a blank facade falling over his face as he approached me with a look in his eyes, a look that he was going to rip someone's throat out if they got in his way. Is it true? Alpha Sean questioned with such seriousness as his eyes darkened. I nodded, emotionless. Let's talk inside, he suggested as I nodded in response before he turned around to face many of his pack fighters as he commanded, camp out here. It's been an hour since we entered the living room. We had it all planned out on what we would do without the help of Rachel's pack, since it would take at least a day for all of them to get here from Australia and we wouldn't want to waste any time. My mind began to rush as my wolf was howling in loneliness, craving for his mate. I tried mind-linking Davina, yet it kept disconnecting. I clenched the arm rest and groaned in frustration. Raymond is thirsty for revenge, Alpha Sean whispered to himself, his eyes remained dark. Alpha Aiden, George rushed in, panting heavily. There is absolutely nothing out there. No traces of our Luna whatsoever because these guys are good at covering their tracks. We need to act quickly, Alpha, Jake added, coming in as he pulled a shirt over his body. My sister is in danger while you all sit here and discuss how to do this and that. She's suffering out there. She's not yet, I protested. I haven't felt anything through the bond. How can we find Luna Davina if we don't have any traces of where she is? Beta Luke asked, keeping his eyes focused on Ace who happened to be deep in thought. There was a minute of silence, everyone deep in thought on how to rescue the Luna. I growled in frustration and grabbed the nearest vase, smashing it on the floor in frustration as we all watched it shatter into pieces. No one dared to flinch. Alpha, Beta, Rachel shouted, running down the stairs quickly with relief washing over her panicked face. There's a piece of clothing with a very faint unfamiliar scent. Maybe you should use this. Rachel rushed towards me before handing me the small piece of fabric with specks of blood. I inhaled the horrible scent and sure enough, it was faint but my alpha sense were shouting at me that this was a rogue scent. Ken, use this to help you track your Luna. I handed my tracker the fabric as he nodded in approval before quickly gathering his team who were standing in the corner silently. We watched Ken and his group head out, shifting in mid-air and into the forest. I could feel the pain wash over me as I stumbled back into the chair, placing a hand on my forehead as I tried to stop the pain that was quickly forming. I closed my eyes for a moment before the pain had completely disappeared. I opened my eyes and looked up to see Ace staring at me worriedly. I looked to my left to see Alpha Sean, his eyes distant as I knew that he was deep in thought. Rachel was standing next to Jake who held her tightly, her fists clenched at her sides as if she was going to punch someone in an instant. I cleared my throat, all eyes snapping to me like hungry wolves. The pain has started for Davina and now, we must act. Quickly. Wake up, sleepyhead, a familiar voice whispered into my ear as I opened my eyes slowly, hoping it was all just a nightmare. I tried moving my hands but unfortunately, my hope had been shattered for I cannot move my hands since it was tied together. I groaned and tried moving on the chair but to only fail for I was bounded to a chair, like I was bounded to Aiden. I growled out and snapped my eyes towards the guard who was watching over me as it happened to be Ben. I narrowed my eyes in on him as he spat in my face, looking at me with lust in his evil eyes. What did you do, Stacy? I asked whilst trying to get in touch with my wolf. Nothing, she listened to me and apparently, she agreed to whatever bullshit I fed her, Ben answered in a deep voice before smirking. Not true to their word, they hadn't come back to collect me for their little blood test. They had left me to rot with no food or whatever whatsoever. It had only been a day or two, but my hope was slowly fading and I knew I was getting weaker every minute of the day. My fear of losing my child began to grow. I bit my lip and looked down, fighting back the tears that were brimming my eyes. Leave her, a voice I was not expecting at all, spoke loud and clear as I allowed my head to hang. I'll deal with her myself. But Raymond told me to. We're changing shifts, the voice interrupted. Ben growled in response before slamming the door shut behind him. Davina, please hear me out, Stacy whispered as she placed a bread on my lap. I looked up and glared at her, tears vanished and anger rising. I could decipher the guilt in her eyes, and I could also tell that her face has gotten slimmer, meaning she hasn't been eating much. Her ivy green eyes were turning light red, meaning the rogue life was starting to consume her. What do you have to say for your betrayal? I asked quietly, the similar pain in my chest formed as the words escaped my lips. Ben gave me a choice, to live with a pack or to live without one and be free. Look, I knew picking the rogue life was stupid, but it's too late because I'll have to go through hell to get back to a normal wolf. All my life, Davina, she paused, biting her lip before sighing as she sat down in front of me, all my life. I have been tortured by my own demons. I've been living in the darkness for so long, and I'll admit, I wasn't the person I am today in the past. I was so innocent. But the death of my parents changed all of that. Julia was the only family I had, yet I yearned to be free and live a careless life, one I've always dreamed of. A tear slid down her cheek as my wolf immediately connected herself back to me as she howled in anger at her betrayal. I had accepted her for who she was and had always defended her, even protected her mate from my own. A part of me wished I had never stopped him. The next words were going to pain me, and I might regret it, but as I looked into her eyes, I immediately closed off my emotions and said, "Now you've gotten the life you have always wanted." Another tear slid down her cheek as she quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand before lifting the bread to my mouth. I stared at her with suspicion, but she only gave me a sad smile as I shrugged and immediately munched on it, the hunger dying down. "I know you're pregnant with a pup," Stacy whispered, her gaze dropping down to my stomach. "I'll help protect you and your child in every way that I can, and in return, I'll only want your forgiveness." Her eyes pleaded for me, the eyes that once belonged to my best friend. I looked down to my stomach. The pup I carried belonged to Aiden and I cannot afford to lose he or she within me. I gulped and closed my eyes, wishing Aiden would find me soon before I die. My eyes fluttered open as I looked at Stacy and nodded. "If you help me protect my pup, then I'll forgive you before you turn into a heartless bitch." Stackeye nodded before standing up. She wiped the remaining tears from her face, and just as the door was ripped open, her eyes and face was void of emotions. I did the same as my blank eyes snapped towards the person who barged in. "Raymond, time to find out what's so special about your blood, my dear," Raymond announced with a smirk as Tan and Ben followed behind before approaching me as they untied me from the chair. Again, they tied my hands at the back when I stood up as Ben held me from one side and Tan held me from the other. I groaned as they pulled my arm back a bit and looked at Stacy, who was now conversing with Raymond. "Take her to the medical room," Raymond ordered as Ben and Tan nodded before they pushed me outside, where I found a small group of rogues training in pairs. My heart broke at the sight of little children with dirty and shredded clothes on their bodies, but they were laughing amongst each other, almost as if they had no worry in the world. Once I had stepped outside, the sunlight hit my skin as I breathed in the fresh air with a mixed scent of the rogues. I sighed as Tan and Ben pushed me towards a small tent, capturing a few rogues' attention as whispers erupted amongst the crowd. "Move faster or they'll want to rip you apart to avenge their lost ones," Tan whispered into my ear as I rolled my eyes but fastened my pace. The inside of the tent was amazingly clean as it wasn't filled with any rogue scent. It smelt more like lavender, as if it was welcoming you home. My mind swirled with thoughts of Aiden, wondering if he was out there looking for me or too busy to care. I stared at the figure right before me as she was short but only by an inch or two. her long black hair stopping by her waist. Her brown eyes were filled with pity as she motioned for me to sit down on the stool. I did as I was told whilst Ben and Tan removed themselves from the tent, leaving the woman to do her job. "Hello, Davina," the woman greeted with a soft voice, her eyes shifting to the entrance of the tent every minute or so. "You might not remember me, but your father saved me and took me in as one of his pack members when you were 7, I gulped. "What happened?" She sighed. "Raymond happened. He found me wandering on the pack grounds, then snatched me away since I worked as one of the pack's nurses, but am positively sure that I was replaced after." I shrugged and nodded. "What are you going to do to me?" Her brown eyes softened. "Oh dear, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to get some blood from you and Raymond will test it out on a rogue to see if it truly gives you strength to destroy any wolf." I wanted to laugh in her face, but before I could, Raymond barged in like an idiot he was and glared at the woman. I faced the woman to let her know that I was afraid, but she only squeezed my hand tightly as if to say that everything will be okay. I inhaled quietly before the woman got to work. After the woman, Dr. Haley, Tan had led me outside the tent as all rogues formed a large circle. I watched a rogue, his head hanging as he approached Raymond, who held a clear, plastic cup in his hands with red liquid inside that had been withdrawn from my system earlier, my blood. I watched the rogue bow down before Raymond before slowing standing back up. "You'll die in honor of your alpha," Raymond announced, his voice booming through the whole pack grounds. Whispers erupted amongst the crowd, and with my enhanced hearings, I could tell they were talking about what was in Raymond's hand. I looked around the crowd to see some pair of eyes on me, giving me dirty looks, and some showing off their sharp canines as if to frighten me. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. I observed intensely as the rogue lifted the cup to his lips and gulped it all down within a second. My heart was thundering inside my chest as we all watched with curiosity. The rogue took 3 steps back before dropping the plastic cup on the ground, his eyes widening in fear as if he had just seen a ghost. The rogue's eyes darkened before he shifted into his dark brown wolf, growling furiously at the fearful crowd. Children hid behind their parents' legs whilst adults, especially the fighters, stood in their protective stance, waiting for something to happen. The loud howl the rogue had released was full of pain and misery as it echoed throughout my ears. I tried not to squirm under Raymond's death gaze, as I kept my eyes trained on the rogue ahead of me. The wolf body arched its back and immediately, we heard a loud crack. Gasps erupted amongst the crowd as the wolf's body to crack in all different directions before it slowly fell onto the ground, his head on his front paws. I watched Raymond slowly walk around the wolf, fearless as a devilish smirk played on his lips. "Kill the daughter of the beast who killed your family." My jaw clenched at his words as I watched the wolf's red eyes snap open, my wrists suddenly feeling free. I looked behind to see Tan, Ben, and Stachi backing away slowly as I cursed under my breath. It was a trap. I was to battle someone who had my own blood coursing through their own veins. I crouched a bit, getting ready to shift as the rogue snarled at me, revealing his sharp canines. I looked down to my stomach and gulped inaudibly, knowing that the rogue crowd wants me absolutely dead but did not know that I was carrying a pup, not that they cared anyway. I cracked my knuckles before shifting into my wolf, ripping my dirty clothes into a million pieces as I let my wolf free. She shook her fur freely once we finally shifted as I could feel her overtake me before she growled. "Besides an alpha, she is the strongest wolf we know, and to determine if her blood does give us strength, we need to test it out first. So I decided to use our Omega, fighting against our very own, powerful Luna," Raymond announced, loud and clear. "Bastards." I growled, the blood inside of me boiling as my wolf frowned, at everyone's face, wanting to tear them apart limb by limb, and I knew that she was capable of doing that without my mate's help. I watched the rogue lunge towards me but to only miss my wolf as she easily sidestepped him and ran her claws along his body. He howled in pain, and just as my wolf was going for the last kill, the rogue's body jumped into the air, howling louder than ever as every bone in his body cracked once more, shifting back into his lifeless, human form. I watched Stachi stalk over towards me, guiding me towards the nearest tent before shifting into my human form as I pulled a long, black t-shirt over my body. I groaned at the disgusting scent of the shirt before walking out of the tent, Raymond standing only a few feet away before landing a punch to my face, but I knew that was coming, so I ducked and balled my fist, punching his nose where I heard a sickening but satisfying crunch of his nose. "Your blood is forever dangerous, so I guess we'll wipe out your entire existence," Raymond said quietly, holding his nose as his trembling eyes darkened. "It would be so much fun to watch my nephew die in pain along with his fucking mate." Before I could respond to his comment, Ben pinched the bridge of his nose as his knuckles connected with the side of my head. The pain soared everywhere, my eyes feeling heavy as I felt him land another punch on the other side of my head. Before I passed out, I felt a different fist, softer this time as it landed on my head, knocking the shit out of me as I immediately collapsed onto the ground. I was fucked. "Aiden, help me. I need you." A tear slid down my cheek. "Get the fuck out," I shouted, using a bit of authority in my voice as Ace ducked down after I threw a heavy textbook at him. "Dude, calm down," Ace snarled, clenching his fists. "It's too painful," I hissed, holding the sides of my head, knowing that Davina had been punched here and there. I had realized nothing was aimed at her stomach, which I was fucking thankful for. When I heard the shocking news of Davina being pregnant with our pup and the future alpha, I almost shifted in happiness. I knew Davina was doing her very best to keep our pup protected from the fucking rogues. Rogues. That word sent me into a killing frenzy. My wolf growled loudly inside my head, wanting to shift as I could feel my eyes darken by the way Ace placed his hands up in the air as if to say he surrenders. My breath turned into pants as I clenched and unclenched my fists. "Breathe. Alpha, breathe," Ace said in a soothing tone. I shook my head, knowing the only person that can calm me down has been abducted. I stormed out of the office, pushing Ace aside in the process as I walked outside. I was expecting to smell my mate's scent, but I was left disappointed. I was so close to shifting until I heard Ken's voice, ringing through the trees. I looked to my left to see Ken and his tracker group run to me half naked with excitement, evident in their jumping. I frowned at their smiles as Ken pants heavily in front of me. "We've found our Luna," he announced, his eyes full of pure happiness. My wolf was on high alert now as I could feel the happy vibes emanating from him. I could also tell that George and his group glowed with the same happiness as I looked behind to see Ace, nodding in my direction before running into the pack house to deliver the news to Alpha Sean. "Thank you, Ken," I whispered as I looked at him before looking at his group. "Thank you all. We would risk our own lives to save our beloved Luna," one of my trackers said with delight. I nodded in response and turned around to see Alpha Sean, his beta and many pack fighters jog in our direction. I could tell he was also glowing with relief as he reached me, placing both hands on my shoulders, which made me cock an eyebrow at him. "Time to beat some fucking SS," Alpha Sean said, smirking at me then towards the crowd of pack fighters and trackers that had gathered closely around us. For a man who's 45 years old, he knew what was up. I watched every men and women pile into 10 black vans, my pack and Alpha Sean's combined. I got into the first van with Alpha Sean as Jake started the car, following by the rest behind. "Luna Davina isn't far from here," Ken said, poking his head through the 2 seats. "The group of rogues are small but their scent is strong, which meant that their skills are also good." I nodded at Ken's intel before he placed a map on my lap with a red marker drawn on it with a big, red X where my mate was located. "Step on it," I commanded Jake, who nodded, determination shone in his eyes before the car started rolling. It took a few hours to reach my uncle's small, rogue pack. We had parked the vans just a few kilometers away, so they wouldn't be able to sense our presence. We all climbed out before running over our plan again. Our plan was whoever found Davina first would bring her straight back to safety, no questions asked. I looked around to see the pack fighters and trackers showing bravery and determination as their eyes darkened, ready to kill if needed. "If you die in honor for your pack, your leader, but remember, your top priority is Luna Davina." Clear as day. Clear. It was my turn, my wolf firing up. "Leave Raymond to me. I shall deal him with my own hands," I saw all heads nod towards Alpha Sean and I before they all knelt down on their knees, including our betas. Alpha Sean and I gave each other a look before giving them all a stern nod as if to say, "We're proud." We bowed down to our leaders in respect. A started, looking up at me as a smirk played on his lips. "And we thank you for your faith you have in all of us," Luke finished. After they finished their little speech, Luke and Ace stood up, following by the others as they started cheering for a few seconds before silencing themselves. Alpha Sean and I looked at each other before shifting into our wolves, my wolf hungry to kill. Alpha Sean and I slowly headed towards the battleground as I heard bones crack and clothes shred behind. "We're coming for you, Davina." I was shoved towards a tent as every single rogue delivered a punch towards my head or arm for killing their rogue friend. After the last one had delivered one to the side of my head, I could feel my head spinning as it pounded against my forehead. My eyes were blurry but I could see Raymond walk in with a satisfying smirk on his face as I spat at him. I could feel the blood trickle down the side of my head as I sniffed the metallic scent. My wolf was long gone, and I could feel my lungs, desperate for air whilst I could feel the mind link between the pack members and I have been disconnected by the lack of oxygen. "You don't look too good," Raymond commented as he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I growled, my eyesight becoming clear again as I realized that Raymond's face was just inches away from mine. I stiffened as he sniffed me out, his lips trailing my neck as I flinched. I couldn't do anything for my hands were tied behind my back and all I could do was stay still and wait for help. His hands roamed around my stomach as if trying to feel for the pup inside me. He nibbled on my earlobe which he thought was going to have a moan escape my lips. I let out a shrill piercing scream which made him stumble back, covering his ears as wolves have very sensitive hearing. Raymond narrowed his eyebrows in one me before placing a big hand over my mouth as he licked one side of my face. I whimpered in disgust but he saw that as an advantage. He took his hands off my mouth before moving his lips towards mine and just as his lips almost touched mine, he immediately stumbled back at the loud screams and the sound of clothes shredding. My mind filled with relief as an oh so familiar scent crawled up my nostrils, a smile tugging on my lips. My wolf immediately connected herself to me and was now on full alert. Her happy vibes were radiating at the scent of our mate. Raymond cracked his neck, giving me one last stare before walking out of the tent and shifting into his wolf. I struggled in my seat, trying to untie myself but to no avail. Feet shuffling appeared as I looked up to see Stashi with a panicked facial expression, hurrying behind me before untying my hands. I stood up, brushing off the dirt before looking up to see Stashi with a knife against her throat. My heartbeat increased and the pounding in my head was fading fast as my eyes widened at the weapon in her hand. "Stacky, put the knife down," I commanded softly, tears brimming her eyes. "I hate myself for what I've done and I'm really sorry," Stashi replied, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I really didn't." "Stashi, put the knife down and well talk," I commanded again, my eyes directed at the weapon as my wolf, on the other hand, commanded me to go to my mate. "Tell Julia I love her and am sorry. Besides, it's better to die by my own hands than Aiden's." Stachi whispered her final words before my eyes watched her slit her own throat, collapsing onto the ground as her glowing red eyes faded, her eyelids closing a few seconds later. My eyes watered as I fell onto my knees, shaking her lifeless body and screaming for her to wake up. My wolf whimpered at the sight before me as my body trembled in sadness and anger that she would do such a thing and leave her sister behind. A few minutes later, I stood up and wiped my tears away, showing no sign of weaknesses, when I walked into the battlefield as I whispered, "I forgive you, Stashi Hills." I turned around, not looking back as I exited the tent to see countless lifeless bodies laying helplessly on the ground. My eyes glazed over the wolves fighting each other, in search for a particular wolf. My heartbeat raced as I stepped over the dead bodies that had been torn apart until a large hand grabbed my arm, pulling me back inside another tent. My wolf was ready to shift, but my eyes locked onto a familiar, blue pair of eyes that was full of joy and relief. His eyes were clouded, meaning he was mind-linking someone. My eyes softened as I wrapped my hands around my brother's neck, inhaling his scent to make sure he wasn't just a dream. "We need to get to safety," Jake declared after our little reunion. I shook my head as I bit my lip, my wolf firing up as I stepped into the battlefield once again. "I'm going to fight," he shook his head. "It's not safe, for you and the baby," I sighed, patting my stomach. "I'm sure the baby would want to kick ass with me," Jake managed to smile. "I'm not going to win this argument, right?" I shook my head with a shrug. "Fine," I grinned as Jake shifted into his wolf, but I remained in my human wolf, knowing that I was too weak to even shift. Jake and I exited the tent as he shielded me from the wolves, but in the corner of my eyes, a rogue wolf approached me with full speed as I immediately snapped my head in its direction, quickly deciphering its gender. "Jake," I whispered. I clenched my fists before narrowing my eyebrows in on her as she raced towards me, gathering all my energy just as my fist met her wolf face. I watched the wolf fall backwards, whimpering in pain as Jake stared at me with shock before shrugging it off as he leapt onto her, ripping her wolf limb by limb. Sensing another wolf behind, I clenched my jaw as I turned around to see another rogue wolf, eyeing its prey before leaping onto me. I immediately sidestepped him, punching the wolf's body before I realized it did him no pain. A high-rank wolf. I cracked my neck to the side before glaring at the wolf, eyeing him suspiciously as his red eyes death stared at me, shaking his fur as if shaking off the dirt. I cocked an eyebrow before the wolf growled, running towards me in full speed as I could feel my wolf rising, and before I knew it, I shifted into my wolf as she swiftly leapt into the air, then landed on top of the wolf. I immediately let my wolf take the lead as she snarled, showing off her canines before swiftly running towards the rogue on all fours, and without hesitation, her canines sank into its neck, the wolf howling in pain. As soon as my wolf knew the rogue was lifeless, she tossed its lifeless body away before howling in victory. My eyes observed the battlefield for Jake but realized he was missing. Just as I was about to go for a hunt for him, in the corner of my eyes, a rogue wolf was in the air and just about to land onto me as I embraced myself for the worst. But instead, I felt no hard impact and realized the scent of my beta was already ripping the rogue wolf into pieces. I gulped, nodding my head in Ace's direction before his wolf shook its head. I sighed before running towards the woods, two wolves joining me as I immediately thanked the moon goddess. It was Ian and Danny, guiding me towards safety. Three unfamiliar people was standing next to Black Van, a woman approaching me with a black shirt before placing it gently inside my mouth. My wolf walked behind a tree before I shifted back into my human form, throwing on the long, black t-shirt, Davina. Ian exclaimed just as I walked out to only see both Danny and Ian in a pair of black boxer shorts. "Thank goddess," I chuckled before embracing the both of them before I faced the woman, cocking my head to the side in confusion. "Who are you?" "We are the pack fighters from BlueMoon," she answered before nodding her head. My jaw dropped. "Does this mean?" I trailed off, shocked. "Yes, Alpha Sean is out there," she responded with a proud smile. It has been a solid half an hour as I paced in front of the van impatiently for Aiden and Sean, constantly biting my nails nervously. Just as I was about to question Ian and Danny, the trees and bushes began to rustle as I instinctively gasped. The woman, my bodyguards and the two men from BlueMoon immediately moved in front of me. My heart skipped a beat just as a familiar scent crawled up my nostrils as I broke through the barrier, my eyes searching for my mate. And like a Greek god, Aiden stepped out of a tree in his human form, shirtless, as I ran into his strong arms as they lifted me into the air before embracing me tightly. "Aiden," I whispered, tears brimming my eyes as I inhaled his addicting scent. "Oh my goddess, are you okay?" Aiden questioned before placing me gently on the ground as a large group of wolves emerged from the trees in the corner of my eyes, their heads hanging as if not trying to stare at our reunion. "Is the pup okay?" I nodded as he wiped my tears away with his thumb. "We're okay." Aiden tucked my head under his chest and inhaled my scent, despite the odor, calming down his beating heart as I smiled, kissing his chest before pulling away to find Alpha Sean throwing on a blue t-shirt. "Alpha Sean, Davina," he said, relief flooding his body as he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I'm glad you're safe," I nodded. "Thank you," he chuckled. "They'll always look out for you." I grinned as I immediately returned to Aiden's side, who wrapped an arm around my waist possessively. Thank you, everyone. I swear I thought I was going to die here. We wouldn't let that happen, Ace said from behind before bowing his head in submission. I chuckled. I'm honored. Raymond's rogue pack has been wiped out, Alpha Sean declared out loud, getting straight to the point as everyone cheered, pumping their fists in the air as I laughed. I looked up at Aiden as he crashed his lips down onto mine. I smiled into our kiss before slightly pulling away as I whispered, "My hero, it's been 3 weeks since I've returned home safely." A lot had happened during those weeks. Firstly, Julia had demanded Ace to create a private funeral for her sister, which the invitation had only extended towards Rachel and I. Secondly, a few days later after the funeral, Rachel and her 2 groups of people that had accompanied her had returned back home to Australia, her loving mate and pup who I heard was ecstatic for her return. Thirdly, Julia and his baby bumps were getting bigger as our mates were getting excited by the day. Julia and Ace had already decided their names, whilst Aiden kept on making a long list on what our pup's name should be. "Let's put the letter B for your Bria," I had recommended, which caused Aiden to drop all things he was holding and looked at me with happiness in his eyes. "Should we?" he had questioned, a bit hesitant. I had laughed and nodded, kissing his cheek before returning back to my pregnant cave, as Aiden called it. Today was just one of those normal days where Julia and I would sit anywhere in the pack grounds, surrounding ourselves by children so we would know how it felt like. The pack members had already noticed the bump on my stomach as they started making decorations and already buying new clothes. Aiden and Ace had been distant lately, traveling around the country to talk with the other alphas that I was not a threat and I would never harm anyone with my blood. Most alphas agreed and decided to back off, but there were still a few who was uncertain, but one did say that they didn't want the Moon Bloods to attack them and take over their lands. "Davina, are you listening?" Julia asked, waving a hand in my face as I blinked twice, nodding my head with a smile. The warm breeze picked up and the children around Julia and I were admiring the baby bumps, which I thought was adorable. "I was listening," I answered, biting my lip hoping that she wouldn't see through my lie. "No, you weren't," Julia replied, shaking her head in amusement. I looked up at the night sky and realized that the stars were twinkling extra brightly today. The trees caging the pack grounds were decorated with fairy lights. Julia had told me that it was for a special occasion and I didn't bother asking what the special occasion was. I realized that the pack members were beginning to file out one by one and formed a large circle, making me turn around a little bit too fast. A large hand held onto my arm to steady me as I looked up to see Jake with a smile, helping me stand upright as the 3 of us walked to the circle. My heart rate increased as I saw little children holding little baskets, dancing in the middle as they threw rose petals on the ground. I arched my eyebrow in confusion as the other side of the circle split into 2, revealing the most handsome man that has walked this earth alive. Aiden walked out in a blue button-up shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and a pair of black jeans. I watched his hair stay put and his brown eyes staring at me with pure happiness. My wolf purred at the beautiful sight as I swooned right on the spot. Jake tugged me forward as I gulped, letting him guide me to the center of the circle and in the middle of the rose petals where Aiden met me. Jake retreated back into the crowd as I looked up to see Aiden's eyes, his lips instantly crashing his lips onto mine. On instinct, my eyes fluttered close as I wrapped my arms around his neck, inhaling his scent as he filled the kiss with passion and love before pulling away, leaving me breathless. "Everyone has gathered here to witness a very special moment," Aiden announced, loud and clear. My heartbeat increased rapidly as the world stopped around me when Aiden knelt down onto one knee, pulling out a red, velvet box. Tears were brimming my eyes as my shaking hands covered my mouth whilst I watched him open the small box, revealing the most beautiful ring I have ever seen in my whole entire existence. The ring was gorgeous as the silver glimmered in the moonlight, tears running down my cheeks like waterfalls. It was rare for any wolf, let alone an alpha, to propose to their mates because we did things differently to humans. Once you completed the mate bond, you were bounded together as if already married. Davina Reginald Rosales. "Will you do the honor of becoming my wife as humans call it?" And his deep voice questioned into the silent night, the men whooping and the women swooning out loud. "I will," I whispered, knowing that everyone could hear me with their enhanced hearings. Aiden grinned before slipping the ring onto my finger, the ring settling just perfectly. I squealed, which earned a chuckle from Aiden as he rose. I jumped onto him and was prepping his handsome face with kisses. He grabbed my face with two of his hands and stared into my eyes for a moment. His eyes darkened as he gave me a smirk, devouring my lips for a minute or so. He pulled away, placing me gently on the ground before taking 2 steps away from me as I stared at him in utter confusion. "You are my queen." My eyes lit up as a smirk played on my lips. "Alpha, bow down to me." Aiden nodded and knelt down before me without hesitation as gasps erupted amongst the crowd. I watched him lower his head in a submissive bow. As an alpha blood, I knew it would be hard to bow to another wolf in such a way, even if it was his or her mate. Before I could tell him he could stand, the other male wolves started bowing down like Aiden as I gasped. The women smiled as they all lowered their heads in my direction, my heart fluttering as my wolf howled in dominance. Once I recovered, Aiden stood up along with the men as he made his way back to me, his body pressed against mine. "You are mine and my queen," he whispered seductively as my body melted into his arms. A smile made its way back to my lips as I pressed them against his, which earned very loud cheers from the crowd. A king only bows down to his queen. The 7-year-old little girl with brunette hair was lifted into the air by Aiden, who swung her around effortlessly. My fear for her being dropped zoomed past my calm scale. "Aid, put her down," I exclaimed, horrified. "It's dangerous." "It's not, babe," Aiden replied with a laugh as he pecked her cheeks, then the tip of her nose, which made her giggle. My wolf purred at the sight as I watched them in awe until Jake walked in with a bag of chips in his hands whilst munching on it distractedly. Jake has been a big support to me when I went through my pregnancy stage where I got all emotional and Aiden wasn't there to calm me down due to alpha meetings, but whenever he was around, Aiden provided me with Ben and Jerry's, my heaven. "Uncle Jake," the little girl exclaimed excitedly before wiggling herself out of Aiden's arms. Jake dropped his packet of chips and picked up the little girl before prepping her face with kisses. "Alpha, you're on patrol now," Jake informed as Aiden nodded, walked over to me before giving me a passionate kiss before pulling away, then moved on to kissing the little girl's forehead. "So sis, are you ready to train the women yet?" Jake asked before putting my daughter onto the floor. I nodded. Aiden had requested that I should train all the women who didn't know how to fight after a few months later of giving birth to our little one. Jake protested against his request, but I asked him to step down so that I could accept Aiden's request peacefully. I walked out of the pack grounds and found children laughing and playing as if there were no care in the world. The territory was swarmed with pack guards as Aiden did not want another kidnap and wanted me to be safe, especially our daughter now that I have given birth. Aiden had also assigned 2 of his most trusted guys to our daughter, Jake being one of them, whilst Danny and Ian were stuck with me. I watched Jake release my daughter's hand, her green-blue eyes glimmering in the sunlight before she started making her way towards a group of girls, her brunette hair flowing behind. "You're both raising her well," Jake commented with a smile as he slung an arm around my shoulders. "It'll be tough when she shifts and realizes the power that she possesses," I whispered, watching my daughter run around, a little boy tailing behind. "It'll be fine," Jake replied. "We'll be there to protect her." "Well, of course," I chuckled as I watched the little girl catch Aiden's eyes as he was already heading towards the pack house. I watched Aiden give me a thumbs up before creeping up behind her, pulling her to his chest as he inhaled her scent, then kissed her cheek. Our daughter threw her head back and laughed, a bunch of kids watching them in awe. I smiled as Aiden carried our daughter towards me, pecking my lips before inhaling my scent as he sighed in content. I laughed. "You're one hell of a lucky girl," Aiden whispered to our daughter as he smiled at the both of us whilst Jake walked away. I punched his arm lightly for his bad use of language as he chuckled. "You are a Brooklyn," I whispered, my forehead touching hers. "Brielle Reginald Rosales Brooklyn."